Game of Thrones. I have a Wolverine template. Chapter 21. Maria Vengeance. Maria POVI sat alone in the courtyard, hands covering my face, the remnants of a nightmare still clinging to me. My past, the brothel years, haunted me like a shadow I couldn't shake. I felt dirty, absolutely filthy. All the men I had pleasured did so with hollow affection, masking cruelty behind smiles and false words. Men who abused me, using my body for their own vile gratification, men who were evil to their core. Their disgusting actions haunted me now, replaying in my mind. Why am I remembering this? Why can't I leave it behind? I should move on, I should be stronger. But the memories clawed at me, refusing to let go, a reminder of the dirt that still stained my soul. Lost in my thoughts, a sudden thud echoed across the ground. I looked up to see a figure fall from the sky, landing on his feet with the grace of a predator. He wore a hood and mask, the scourge of lanisport, my savior. Richard, the man who had saved me from that life. The boss of the Lionheart family. My boss. What seems to be troubling you so late at night, Maria? Richard asked as he approached, his presence commanding even in the silence. I could say the same to you, I replied, trying to mask the vulnerability in my voice. Just finishing some favors, he said, removing his mask. His features were familiar yet jarring, a boy who had grown into a man far too quickly. Richard's face, though still youthful, bore the sharp lines of someone who had seen too much, lived too fast. Now then, you haven't answered my question. Why are you up so late? His gaze pierced through me, probing for answers I wasn't sure I wanted to give. I've been having nightmares, I mumbled, unwilling to reveal the full depth of my torment. I looked down at my hands, ashamed to burden him with my past. Of what? His voice was steady, unrelenting. Madame Alain, what she did to me. The brothel women, what they subjected me to. I felt trapped, but now it's better because you saved me. It's better now. I tried to convince myself as much as him. Richard's eyes softened briefly, but his expression quickly hardened. Do you want revenge? I hesitated. Revenge. The word tasted bitter in my mouth, yet something inside me stirred. Yes, I wanted them to suffer. I wanted them to feel the helplessness they had inflicted on me. But something held me back. My morals, perhaps. Still, the burning in my gut, the anger, refused to let me be. They pay protection money, I said quietly, trying to justify my inaction. The madam contributed to the Lionheart coffers, after all. So what? Richard's voice was fierce. Protection money is a requirement, not a favor. They've never done a favor for me, and they've certainly never done one for you. His gaze intensified, unwavering. You're my family, an important part of it. We're Lionhearts. If someone crosses one of us, they cross us all. Now, will you take your revenge or not? Richard stood and extended his hand to me. I looked up at him, then at his hand, my heart pounding. He was right. I wasn't weak anymore. I wasn't that helpless girl they could break. I wanted revenge. I wanted to see Madame Alain and the others suffer. I reached out and took his hand, my eyes gleaming with newfound resolve. John Pav. The next day it was early morning when my men and I made our way to the brothel. This visit wasn't for pleasure, it was a mission. A mission to capture Madame Alain. Richard, my brother, my boss, the man who spared me and gave me salvation, the only person I feared, had assigned this task to me. Failure wasn't an option. As we approached the brothel, two burly men stood at the entrance. They were shorter than me, and as soon as they saw us, their bravado melted away, fear clear in their eyes. Men like this, quick to mock the weak, always crumbled when faced with true strength. What's your business here, sir? One of them asked, his voice shaky as he glanced between me and the 15 men at my back, all brimming with quiet menace. I stepped forward, towering over him. I want to meet your madam, I said, my tone cold and unforgiving. The man gulped, his confidence shattered in an instant. All right, he said as he showed us in. I enter with all my men. The man, pale with fear, led us inside without protest. I walked in with my 15 men, the atmosphere shifting, tense and heavy with anticipation. The workers watched us with wary eyes, sensing something was about to happen. And then I saw her. Madame Alain, the reason why I'm here. Get her, I ordered, my voice a low growl. My men moved swiftly. Madame Alain barely had time to react before they grabbed her, dragging her toward me. The brothel erupted into chaos, screams echoing through the hall as the workers watched in horror, but I remained unfazed. Their fear didn't matter. As she was brought before me, I stood before Madame Alain, my eyes cold and unforgiving. The woman who had tormented so many, the woman who had broken Lady Maria. Now, it was her turn to feel powerless. "This is for Maria," I said, my voice cold as ice, and without hesitation, I drove my fist into her solar plexus. The impact was brutal, and Madame Alain gasped for air, her body folding in on itself as she crumpled to the ground. Her eyes, wide with shock and pain, looked up at me, silently pleading. But there would be no mercy. "Get her on her feet," I ordered my men, my gaze never leaving her trembling form. Just like that, a beating ensued until she became unconscious. The two men who were guarding the brothel door did absolutely nothing. "Destroy the place," I ordered coldly, and chaos erupted behind me as my men carried out the command. The two guards at the entrance were beaten unconscious in moments, their groans silenced by the violence of my crew. With Madame Alain's limp body slung over my shoulder, I marched out of the brothel, the air thick with the sounds of smashing furniture and screaming workers. The sight of the building falling into disarray brought no satisfaction, only a cold sense of finality. As we stepped outside, 5 city guards waited at the entrance, their hands resting on their swords. Instinctively, I tensed, preparing for a fight, but then recognition flickered in my mind. They were familiar, members of the Lionheart family. "John, what's going on?" asked one of the guards, a young man who couldn't have been more than 20. I knew him, as I knew the others. All 5 were part of the family. The Lionheart family had sunk its claws deep into the city, corrupting even the guards. I felt a swell of pride for the family and the power we wielded. "The boss's orders," I said, keeping it brief. That was all it took. The guards, hearing those 3 words, immediately stepped aside, making way for us without a second thought. They owed Richard their lives, their careers, everything. His favor and protection had secured their loyalty. With no further interference, we walked away from the scene, leaving the wreckage behind, without a single repercussion. Maria Pov's John led me deeper into the dungeon beneath the Black Cat Mansion. My unease grew with each step. The foul stench of piss, shit, and blood filled the air, making it hard to breathe. The dark, damp walls seemed to close in, and then I heard it, a scream, raw and filled with pain. A woman's voice, her anguish echoing through the stone corridors. I swallowed hard, fear creeping up my spine. This was no ordinary task. Something was wrong. John, however, walked ahead without a hint of hesitation, his expression calm, as though this kind of horror was routine. That, in itself, unsettled me even more. What kind of man could walk through such misery so easily? "So, Richard told you to bring me here, but why?" "What for?" I asked, trying to shake off my unease. I'd expected Richard himself to guide me, not John. John didn't answer. He simply kept walking, the woman's screams growing louder as we neared a heavy wooden door at the end of the passage. The cries cut off suddenly, leaving an eerie silence in their wake. For a moment, I thought about turning back, but then a familiar voice called from behind the door. "Enter," Richard said, his tone calm and commanding. John pushed the door open, revealing Richard inside the dimly lit chamber. The air was thick with the smell of sweat and blood, and in the center of the room stood the woman, whose anguished screams had echoed through the dungeon. She was bound in a cruel, tortuous position, her arms and legs spread wide in an X shape. Metal chains secured her wrists to the ceiling, while more chains restrained her ankles to the floor, forcing her to stand in painful submission. Bruises and cuts marred her skin, a testament to the torment she had already endured. Her head hung low, dark hair plastered to her face. Her body looked weak, barely conscious. Richard, standing calmly beside her, glanced at me as I entered. His eyes, usually so sharp and calculating, now burned with a cold intensity that sent a shiver down my spine. He didn't need to say anything, the scene spoke for itself. This was more than just punishment, it was retribution. "You're here," Richard said, his voice steady as if this was a routine matter. He didn't look at the woman, whose breathing was ragged and labored. His focus was entirely on me. "Do you know why you're here?" he asked, stepping forward slightly, his presence dominating the room. "Yes," I said as I walked toward the woman. Memories of Richard's promise echoed in my mind. He would take revenge for me. Madame Alain was tied up, her body swaying slightly with the movement of my approach. The stench of excrement and urine assaulted my senses, mingling with the metallic tang of blood in the air. As I neared her, she lifted her head, revealing her face. I gasped in horror, a choked breath escaping my lips. The once familiar features were gone, replaced by a horrifying skinless face. Her middle-aged face before was gone and replaced by grotesque muscle and blood. Richard walked beside me, placing a steady hand on my shoulder. "How do you like the art that I made?" he asked in a calm tone, his voice smooth and measured. Despite the horror surrounding us, a smile crept onto my face. There was a twisted satisfaction in seeing Madame Alain reduced to this state. "Can I have a turn?" I asked, my voice eager. I wanted her to suffer, to feel the weight of every life she had ruined. Richard observed me, a pleased smile forming on his lips. He could sense my hunger for vengeance, my desire to reclaim what was stolen from me. John, standing behind us, remained stoic, his expression unreadable. It was as if he were a shadow, silently observing our exchange without a flicker of emotion. In that moment, it felt like the three of us were bound by a dark understanding. The power of retribution was ours to wield. Richard nodded slightly, granting me the permission I sought. "Go ahead, Maria, show her the consequences of her actions." With those words, a thrill of adrenaline surged through me. This was my chance, my moment to take control and make the madam pay for everything. I stepped forward, fueled by rage and the need for justice. Chapter 21.2 Consigliere. Richard Pav. Madame Alain was lifeless, still tied to the chains that had held her captive. Maria stood next to her, blood staining her hands, a testament to the vengeance she had just unleashed. In that moment, she transformed from a victim into something far more formidable. She was ready for the position I had long envisioned for her. Previously, I hesitated to promote her to the role of consigliere because she lacked a critical quality that every one of my underbosses and capos possessed: ruthlessness. In my world, weakness was a liability. I could not afford to have someone in a position of power who would allow others to walk all over them. But now, witnessing the fire in Maria's eyes, I knew she had crossed a threshold. She understood the cost of revenge and had embraced it fully. Her actions were not merely a reaction to her suffering, they were a declaration of her newfound strength. As I turned to John, I commanded, "Ensure the body is disposed of properly. I want no trace left behind." My voice was steady, a clear indication that I expected nothing less than complete efficiency. John nodded, his expression neutral, accustomed to the darker tasks that came with loyalty to the family. "Consider it done, Richard." With that, I walked toward the exit of the dungeon. "Maria, follow," I instructed, leading her through the dank corridors of the dungeon. The air was thick with a mix of fear and anticipation. "Do you know why I had you do that?" I asked, glancing back at her. Maria looked at me, confusion evident on her face. "Wasn't it for revenge?" she asked, her brow furrowed in uncertainty. "Yes, but it's not only because of that." I paused, allowing the gravity of the situation to settle in. "You've been quite loyal and have taken charge of the ledgers and documents, an important job in the family. Yet you weren't given any position. Do you know why?" I probed, wanting her to understand. She listened intently, and I could see her mind racing as she tried to grasp the implications of my words. "I thought it was because I was a woman and a former whore," she admitted, her voice laced with a hint of deprivation. "You don't see the point, do you?" "I could care less about your gender or your past," I replied, my voice steady. "You are loyal, and you do well for the family. But there's one trait that all my underbosses and capos have developed that you were lacking. And that is," she urged, her curiosity piqued, "ruthlessness. That's what you were missing. The moment you killed Madame Alain, you gained my respect. I respect you now not just because you're Alicent's mother, but because you've shown that you can fend for yourself." Her eyes glinted as she absorbed my words. In that moment, I saw the shift in her demeanor, the flicker of understanding and empowerment. I had orchestrated this transformation not merely for revenge, but to mold her into a formidable ally. With her newfound ruthlessness, I recognized the potential for a powerful partnership, one that could stand beside me as we built our family. "What position will I be receiving?" she asked calmly, her newfound confidence evident in her posture. Consigliere. Consi what? Maria replied, confusion knitting her brow. This reaction mirrored what my capos and underbosses had expressed when they first heard news terms created by me. Consigliere, I clarified, a slight smile creeping onto my face. It's a new title I've coined that means counselor. You will be my advisor, my right hand in this operation. Your job will be to offer guidance, manage our affairs, and oversee our networks. You'll be responsible for ensuring our family's interests are protected and our enemies are dealt with. Maria's expression shifted as the weight of the title began to sink in. Consigliere, she repeated, rolling the unfamiliar word on her tongue. But I've only been managing the ledgers. Why me? Exactly, I replied, my voice steady. You've shown loyalty and competence. In a world where trust is scarce. More importantly, you just demonstrated the ruthlessness required for this position. You've proven that you can make difficult decisions when the time calls for it. That's what I need in a consigliere. Her eyes widened, a blend of surprise and determination igniting within them. What do I need to do? I took a step closer, ensuring she could see the sincerity in my gaze. You'll need to learn the intricacies of our operations, how to navigate our alliances and handle our enemies. It won't be easy, but I believe you have what it takes. You'll have my support, and you'll have the resources of the family at your disposal. Together, we can make our influence felt across lanisport and beyond. She straightened, her confidence surging. I won't let you down, Richard. I know you won't, I said, nodding in approval. This is just the beginning, Maria. Your journey to power starts now. As a symbolic gesture of her new status, I removed my bloody gloves, revealing my bare hand. Kiss the hand of your boss, I instructed, my voice low and serious, but my eyes reflected the pride I felt in this moment. She hesitated for only a heartbeat before leaning in, her lips brushing against my skin in a respectful kiss. The act cemented her loyalty, binding her to the family and to me. We embraced tightly, the weight of the moment hanging between us. In that hug, I could feel the shift in our dynamic. She was no longer just Alicent's mother, a former courtesan. She was now a made woman, a crucial part of my plans for the Lionheart family. As we pulled away, her eyes gleamed with a mixture of determination and gratitude. Thank you, Richard. I won't disappoint you. As of yet, you haven't, I replied, a smirk forming. Now let's get to work. We have a family to strengthen and expand. With that, we exited the dim confines of the dungeon. Part 2 of Chapter 21. Chapter 22. Martell arrival. Elia Martell Pove. A few weeks later, the gentle rocking of the ship stirred me from sleep, the familiar creaking of the timbers. It had been a moon since I'd set out on this voyage, leaving Dornay behind in search of a future I wasn't entirely sure I wanted. My mother had been relentless, spinning webs of alliances to find me a suitable match. I sat up in my cabin, the scent of salt air mingling with the faint perfume still clinging to my clothes, remnants of the grand halls I had visited. Suitors, I thought bitterly. Each left a more bitter taste than the last. Except one. The memory came flooding back, Aldtown. The high tower rising above the city like a sentinel, and a baron charming everyone in sight as we were welcomed by Lord Layton and his children. Among them was Baelor Hightower. He was kind, thoughtful, a stark contrast to the pompous lords I had been paraded before. I remembered how his words about the citadel held me in rapt attention, how I had allowed myself to imagine a future by his side. For a time, I was almost half in love with him. But then came that fateful feast in Aldtown's great hall. Baelor beside me, speaking of manuscripts, his voice soothing amidst the laughter and chatter. A baron, ever the mischief maker, teasing me about my growing fondness for him. And then it happened. A low sound, unmistakable, a fart, escaping from Baelor's chair. Silence fell over the hall. I turned to look at him, his cheeks as red as Dornish wine. Beside me, a baron snickered, then burst into uncontrollable laughter. The whole table followed. Baelor Breakwint, a baron howled, tears in his eyes. A man with such airs. I tried, gods, I tried, to maintain my composure. But I couldn't hold it in. Laughter bubbled up from me, unbidden and unstoppable. After that moment, I couldn't look at Baelor without remembering, and the spell was broken. Perhaps it wasn't meant to be, I had thought as we sailed away from Aldtown. The memory faded, leaving me with a bittersweet smile. A baron had ruined it, of course, as he always did. But maybe he had saved me, too. No suitor had ever felt right. Not even Baylor. I yawned as I stretched my arms out, blinking sleep from my eyes. Rising from my bed, I reached for my brush, sighing. The useless servant who was supposed to help me with my hair and dressing was undoubtedly off on another escapade with my brother. A baron, my mischievous little brother, though I loved him dearly, seemed to live without restraint. I sometimes wished he'd exhibit more control, especially when it came to boundaries. As I brushed my hair, I caught my reflection in the small mirror hanging on the wall. Olive skin, brown eyes, and the dark hair of House Martell, Dornay flowed through me like a current. I considered myself beautiful, though not the most beautiful in the realm, and I was content with that. After tending to my hair and washing my face, I began the tricky task of dressing myself. It wasn't easy without my maid, but I managed. After finishing, I headed out of my room. As I made my way down the hall, I paused, hearing sounds I was all too familiar with, moaning. I winced, recognizing them immediately. One set of noises came from my mother's cabin, where she was undoubtedly with her lover, and the other from a baron's quarters. I sighed deeply, pressing my hand to my forehead in frustration. Of course, a baron was with my maid. Again. It was hard to be surprised anymore. A baron had always been reckless, living life on his terms, rules and expectations be damned. My mother wasn't much different. I loved them both, but sometimes it felt like I was the only one in this family with any sense of propriety. After shaking my head in exasperation, I decided it was best not to linger on it. Heading toward the deck, I sought the comfort of the sea breeze. The ship swayed gently beneath me, the vast ocean stretching as far as the eye could see. The wind tugged at my loose strands of hair as I stepped onto the deck, the air crisp and refreshing against my skin. The horizon was endless, the sun just beginning to rise, casting a soft, golden glow over the water. It was beautiful and calming, a welcome reprieve. For a moment, I stood there alone, soaking in the serenity. Moments later, as I stepped onto the deck, something in the distance caught my eye. I squinted, trying to make it out. It must have been a truly massive rock because I could see it from here. That large, looming shape could only be Castley Rock. Beside it, sprawled along the coastline, was the bustling city of Lanisport, its whitewashed walls gleaming in the sunlight. We'd probably arrive in less than an hour. Finally, I muttered, a hint of celebration in my voice. Soon, my little brother could leave my maid alone and amuse himself in the brothels of Lanisport instead. At least then I wouldn't have to deal with his constant mischief. Third paw of the Martell family had all gathered on deck, the salty breeze tousling their hair as the ship approached the shores of Lanisport. Princess Nymeria of Dornay stood tall and regal, her dark hair pulled back elegantly, watching her two children with a bemused smile. Elia, the elder of the two, now 18 and of marriageable age, was the picture of grace, though her face was marred by irritation. A baron, only a year younger at 17, stood beside her, his mischievous grin broad as always. A baron flashed his sister a mischievous grin, clearly enjoying his ability to provoke her, but Elia wasn't biting. She crossed her arms and stared out at the sea, her silent treatment a familiar defense against her brother's antics. The maid, flustered but intrigued, lingered nearby, casting fleeting glances at a baron, who smirked, reveling in the effect he had on her. Princess Nymeria observed her children with a knowing smile, her eyes softening as she watched the exchange. Despite the teasing and bickering, she knew the depth of affection between them. They had been each other's constant companions, always finding a way back to one another no matter the argument. It was this closeness that reassured her in moments like this. Ahem, Nymeria cleared her throat gently, interrupting the tension with a playful arch of her brow. My little vipers, we are now in Lanisport. Please behave yourselves. Elia gave a small, reluctant smile at their mother's words, while a baron shrugged, still grinning. The Martells had a reputation to uphold, but that never stopped a baron from pushing the boundaries. As their ship glided into the docks of Lanisport, the towering banners of the Golden Lion greeted them. They stepped onto the bustling harbor, the wind carrying the smell of salt and the chatter of merchants. With their royal status confirmed, the guards bowed low, granting the Martell family entry into the city, the land of lions welcoming the serpents of Dornay. As they walked through the lively streets of Lanisport, the Martells couldn't help but marvel at how different the city was from their home in Dornay and the bustling grandeur of Oldtown. Here, everything seemed to move at a quicker pace, the energy of commerce filling the air. Food stalls lined nearly every corner, merchants called out to eager customers, and the streets thrived with people, nobles, common folk, and even children running around, playing games in the alleyways. Business was booming, and it was clear that lanisport was a city on the rise. A baron's curiosity got the better of him as he stopped by a stall offering strange, new foods. The sign above read LFC, Lanisport Fried Chicken, and the aroma of sizzling oil and spices was irresistible. After a moment's hesitation, he handed over a few silver coins and took his first bite of fried chicken. "Oh my gods, a baron moaned, his voice betraying his astonishment at how flavorful it was. The crispy skin, the juicy meat, it was a revelation. Without a second thought, he ordered more, receiving a large bowl filled with golden fried pieces. Paying the vendor, he dashed back to his sister. "Elia, you have to try this," he exclaimed, holding out the bowl eagerly. But Elia, along with her mother, her maid, and the Dornish guards, was already exploring the culinary delights of the city. They had stopped at another popular food stall, Hamburger King or HK for short, where Elia was savoring a beef patty nestled between two soft buns. She took a bite, and her eyes widened with delight at the explosion of flavors. Princess Nymeria, not to be left out, was enjoying her own discovery, a sausage wrapped in a warm, doughy bun. She smiled to herself, savoring the simple yet delicious street food as she watched her children experience the city in their own ways. It seemed Lanisport had much more to offer than they had expected. The Martell family, used to the refined tastes of Dornay, found themselves happily indulging in the city's food culture. This visit, they realized, would be far from dull. Chapter 23. Marriage Proposal Rejected. Joanna Lannister paused. Several days later I sat in the gardens perched atop Castley Rock, the cool breeze stirring the leaves around us. The view from here was breathtaking, with the glittering sea stretching far beyond Lanisport, but the tension in the air kept me grounded. My husband, Tywin, was in the midst of discussing marriage prospects with my dear friend, Nymeria, Princess of Dornay. I had been the one to arrange this meeting. When I mentioned it to Tywin, he had been less than pleased, and even now, as the talks proceeded, his displeasure was evident. His jaw was tight, and his words held a certain sharpness. "So you were proposing a match between one of my children and one of yours?" Tywin's voice was stern, his eyes narrowed slightly as he regarded Nymeria. He did not like the idea, and he made no attempt to hide it. Nymeria, as always, remained unfazed. She leaned back slightly in her chair, the picture of calm as she responded, "Yes. I propose either pairing your son Jaime with my daughter Elia or your daughter Cersei with my son Aberon." Her tone was light, almost carefree, despite the gravity of the proposal. The steely gaze of my husband did little to rattle her. Sensing the growing tension, I interjected with a smile. "Let's discuss the dowry, shall we?" I suggested. The topic of dowries often lightened the mood, as Tywin always considered the advantages to our house with great care. For Elia's dowry, Dornay is willing to offer 100,000 golden dragons, 100 Dornish horses, and, with this marriage pact, the promise of an alliance, Nymeria said, laying out an impressive offer. It was clear she held her daughter's future dear and was willing to provide for her happiness. "Now, I would be interested to hear what you propose for Cersei." I was momentarily taken aback by the offer, as it was significantly more than what my father had given for my own marriage to Tywin. My dowry had been a mere 1,000 golden dragons, but our marriage had been for love, and Tywin had cared little for the wealth that accompanied me. He could have married someone far richer, but he had chosen me, and that thought brought a small smile to my lips. But Tywin was not moved by Nymeria's generosity. His voice was cold and final as he responded, "I reject your dowry for Elia and Jaime. And as for my daughter, I will not marry her to a fourth son." His tone left no room for negotiation, and I knew that he had been set on rejecting the Martells the moment he heard of their proposal. I had only managed to convince him to hear them out, as outright refusing a princess of Dornay would have been a grave insult. "This marriage talk is over. I will not entertain it further," Tywin declared, rising from his seat with a finality that signaled the end of the discussion. His gaze hardened as he looked down at Nymeria, a silent challenge in his eyes. He wanted to make sure she understood that his decision was absolute. Nymeria, to her credit, remained composed. She simply shrugged, as though the rejection meant little to her. "Well, it seems that my daughter and son will remain without betrothals, at least for now," she said lightly, her calm demeanor never faltering. Tywin gave her a curt nod before turning his gaze to me. "I'll leave you to your conversation, my love," he said, his voice softening ever so slightly for me. He trusted me to handle this as diplomatically as possible. "All right, my love," I replied sincerely, wanting to catch up with my old friend. With that, Tywin left the garden, his presence still looming even as he disappeared from view. As soon as he was gone, Nymeria chuckled softly, shaking her head. "Your husband is as stubborn as ever, I see," she said with a smile. I sighed, nodding. "Yes, but I had hoped he might consider the offer, if only for the sake of our families." Nymeria leaned in slightly. "He's a hard man to sway, but I can't say I'm surprised. Still, it was worth a try. Now that the marriage has been rejected, what are your plans?" I asked, curious about what my friend intended to do next. Nymeria smiled, her carefree demeanor unwavering. "Well, I've quite taken a liking to lanisport, and I hear there's a tourney less than a moon from now. I don't mind staying," she said with a light-hearted laugh. I tilted my head in confusion. "You've taken a liking to lanisport? Why, in truth, I hadn't paid much attention to the city of late. My focus had been elsewhere, on my family, especially since my recent pregnancy. My world had become smaller, confined to the halls of Castle Rock." Nymeria's eyes sparkled with amusement. "Oh, you haven't visited the so-called fast food market stalls, have you?" I blinked in surprise. "No, I haven't. For the last moon, I've been cooped up in Castle Rock because of my pregnancy with Tyrion," I said, my voice softening at the mention of my newborn son. Nymeria gave me a knowing nod, understanding the trials of motherhood. She had borne her own children, and we had often spoken of the challenges we faced during those times. "Well, where should I begin?" Nymeria mused, tapping her fingers thoughtfully. With an animated gleam in her eyes, she began to describe the wonders she had discovered in lanisport. "There's this place called LFC that serves something called fried chicken. It's crispy on the outside and tender on the inside, seasoned to perfection. Then there's HK, where they make these things called hamburgers, juicy meat patties sandwiched between soft bread, topped with cheese and sauces that melt in your mouth. Oh, and don't get me started on the hot dogs and the pizzas. The Westerman fries are something you have to try as well, golden and crisp, with just the right amount of salt." As she spoke, I could hardly believe my ears. Fried chicken, hamburgers, these were foods I had never heard of, let alone tasted. My mouth watered at the thought, my imagination running wild with Nymeria's vivid descriptions. "I've never heard of such foods," I admitted, suddenly feeling as though I'd missed out on an entire world beyond the walls of Castle Rock. "They sound delicious." "They are," Nymeria said with a grin. "Trust me, you'll want to visit lanisport soon and try them yourself." A spark of excitement stirred within me. It had been so long since I had ventured beyond these walls, so long since I had experienced something new. Perhaps, once I was fully recovered from Tyrion's birth, I would make that trip to lanisport and see what all the fuss was about. Tywin POVI sat in my solar, the dim glow of a single candle flickering before me as I sifted through the mountain of letters on my desk. My mind, however, wasn't on the parchment in front of me but on the meeting I had just left. Rejecting the Martells had been inevitable. It wasn't that Nymeria's offer lacked thought. Dorne was a fine region, but it held no value to me, not in the grand scheme of things. My son, Jaime, deserved a far better match than what she proposed. Dorne. The word itself tasted bitter. Far too distant, far too wild. No, Jaime must marry someone from a house that would elevate ours to even greater heights, not tie us to a place on the fringes of the realm. The Riverlands, or better yet, the Reach, those were the places where alliances could be made to strengthen the legacy of House Lannister. And then there was Cersei. I have always known what must be done for her. She is meant to sit on the Iron Throne, by Prince Rhaegar's side. A Martell match for her would be nothing more than a wasted opportunity, an insult to her value, and mine. Her only purpose, the only one that matters, is to see her married to the heir of the throne. Nothing less. I glance at the letter from the king, rejecting the invitation to the tourney I've planned in honor of Tyrion's birth. The rejection sits like a stone in my chest, heavier than it should. I've served Aerys for years, built the crown's wealth back from near ruin, secured peace in a kingdom that should have collapsed under his erratic rule. And yet, this is the thanks I receive. He won't even deign to come to Castle Rock for a tourney, to celebrate the birth of my son. Ungrateful fool. But, despite the insult, there's one bright spot. Rhaegar is coming. Prince Rhaegar, the true future of the realm. With him and several of the Kingsguard attending, I know there's an opportunity here, one that Aerys can't see, blinded as he is by his jealousy. I'll make sure that Rhaegar and Cersei find themselves together, that the prince notices her. I'll have them spend time together. Let Aerys stay in King's Landing, wrapped in his paranoia, I think bitterly. I've long since stopped caring about his approval. It's Rhaegar who matters now. He's the future, and Cersei will be his queen. Still, I can't entirely ignore the sting of Aerys' absence. I've done everything for him, for the realm, really, and this is how he repays me. Refusing to attend the tourney at Castle Rock, after all I've done for his crown. My hand clenches around the letter, crumpling it slightly. But I won't waste my anger. I'll channel it, as I always have. When the time comes, when Rhaegar rules, I'll make sure Aerys sees exactly how little he mattered in the end. It will be me and my house that reigns supreme. I lean back in my chair, fingers drumming against the desk. The future is clear to me. House Lannister will rise, not through petty alliances with far-flung houses, but by marrying into the Targaryens themselves. Jaime will find a worthy match in due time. And as for Cersei, she will be queen. Aerys may insult me now, but soon enough, it won't matter. It will be Rhaegar who rules. And with him, the lions of Castle Rock will sit beside the dragons of King's Landing. Chapter 24. The Interesting Squire. Elia Martell POVI stood in the courtyard atop Castle Rock, the sun high above me and the sea winds whipping through the air. My mother's words still hung in my mind. Make friends with your suitor. She had meant Jaime Lannister, of course, but it had been 3 days, and I had made no progress. The reason was simple. Jaime was 10 years younger than me, still a child with his golden curls and bright green eyes. Trying to engage with him felt awkward, forced. But there was one more reason why I couldn't get his attention. Jaime and his sister, Cersei, seemed far more interested in spending time with the squire who had become something of a mystery, Galahad. Galahad, as I now know, was a son of a whore who became a squire to Kevan Lannister and has since gained favor with the Lannisters. Looking back, I had first seen Galahad in lanisport when my family arrived to meet with Kevan Lannister. It was a political visit, an introduction to ensure the Martells' presence was acknowledged in the Westerlands. Galahad had been there, standing quietly in the background. At first glance, I had thought him a typical Lannister squire, tall, with the same golden hair and green eyes that marked the blood of Castle Rock. A baron, always quick with his jests, had remarked that Galahad looked more like a Lannister than a lowly squire. I had laughed then, dismissing the comment as one of a baron's usual quips. But now, after days of observing the boy, I wasn't so sure my brother's joke had been entirely in jest. There was something odd about Galahad. He wasn't just another squire, that much was clear. Servants spoke of him with a kind of reverence, knights treated him with respect beyond his station, and even the Lannisters themselves seemed to regard him with a strange fondness. A squire of low birth, a boy whose mother was rumored to have been a whore, yet he walked among them as if he belonged. One day ago, my interest deepened when Galahad defeated my brother, a baron, in less than 10 seconds. After that, I began watching his spars more closely, observing his actions from time to time. He was kind to the servants, exuding confidence while speaking and sparring with the knights, and he seemed carefree and playful with the Lannister twins. Now, as I stood in the courtyard, watching Jaime and Cersei speak excitedly with Galahad, I couldn't help but wonder if there was truth to the rumors. Was Galahad truly the son of a whore, or was there more to his story? Could he be a Lannister bastard, hidden away from the world but protected by the family's powerful name? He was a mystery that began to gnaw at me. My focus should be on Jaime, yet somehow I found myself drawn to Galahad instead. "May I speak with you, Galahad. I approached him, watching as he playfully sparred with Jaime and Cersei. Galahad noticed me immediately, pausing his mock fight with the twins. His expression shifted from playful to slightly surprised as he stood up straighter. "Hello, Princess Elia," he greeted me, his tone respectful, though there was still a trace of surprise in his eyes. "You wish to speak with me?" I nodded. "Yes." Before Galahad could respond, Cersei and Jaime tugged at his arms, eager to continue their game. They paid me no mind, determined to keep him in their fun. "A moment, young Cersei, young Jaime," Galahad said, smiling down at them. "Why don't you play a quick game of tag, I won't be long." The twins stood stubbornly in place, clearly unconvinced by his offer. Galahad chuckled softly, then reached into a small leather pouch at his side, pulling out a neatly wrapped bundle. He carefully unfastened it, revealing 2 small, homemade cakes. The scent was sweet, tempting, and the twins' eyes lit up immediately. "How about this? I'll give you both a taste of my special cakes," he said with a grin. "But only if you agree to play for a while." With wide smiles, Cersei and Jaime eagerly accepted the cakes. They took a bite, exchanged happy looks, and then ran off, calling out for each other as they began their game of tag. Galahad turned his attention back to me, his expression shifting from playful to attentive. "Now, Princess," he said, his tone polite, "what is it you wish to speak of?" What was that?" I asked, my curiosity piqued as I glanced at the leather pouch from which Galahad had produced the cakes. I'd never seen anything like them before. The outside looked savory, almost like bread or cheese, but when the twins bit into it, I saw a flash of red and white cream. "Would you like some?" Galahad must have noticed my interest and offered, his tone casual. I hesitated, not wanting to appear childish. After all, I was older than him by several years. I opened my mouth to decline, but before I could, he had already taken out another one and held it out toward me. "Here," he said, offering it with a smile. The sweet scent reached me, a mixture of something floral and fresh bread. I hesitated only a moment before accepting. As I bit into the pastry, the burst of flavors hit me at once. The cream inside was sweet with a hint of sour, unlike anything I had ever tasted. It was blissful, and for a moment, I forgot myself, savoring each bite slowly. When I looked up, I realized Galahad was watching me, a small smile playing on his lips. After finishing the cake, embarrassment crept over me, but before I could say anything, he surprised me again. He reached into his pocket and pulled out a handkerchief, gently pressing it to my lips. "You've got cream on your lips, Princess," he said softly. I froze, completely caught off guard, feeling my face flush with both surprise and embarrassment. "Galahad, it's getting boring. Come play with us." Cersei's voice broke the moment, and I saw her frowning impatiently from across the courtyard. All right, Galahad called back. He turned to me, an apologetic look in his eyes. "I'm sorry, Princess Elia, but I've got to get back to my game with the little lord and lady." Before I could protest, he placed the handkerchief in my hand, then quickly moved to join the twins, already laughing as they resumed their play. I stood there, stunned, staring at the handkerchief in my hand. I smiled. Galahad was far more interesting than I'd expected. I sighed, watching him play with the twins. I would find another time to figure him out. A Baron Martell POVI stood in the training yard, face to face with Galahad, Kevin Lannister's squire. The boy's origins were as much a mystery as his skill, and I had once jested, wondering aloud if he was secretly a Lannister. He certainly looked the part. Golden hair, green eyes, and an air of quiet confidence that both intrigued and irritated me. The previous day, I had dueled him, spurred on by his audacious choice of weaponry, 2 swords. It reminded me of Sir Arthur Dane, the Sword of the Morning, my dear friend who had recently sworn his loyalty to the Kingsguard. I had assumed he was merely showing off, perhaps trying to win favor by twirling his twin swords like some street performer. The thought soured in my mouth. So I challenged him, intent on humbling the boy. Garyon Lannister, who had swiftly become my friend, thanks in no small part to his knowledge of the brothels in lanisport, had warned me against it. "Galahad's a squire, sure, but he's better than any knight we have." "You'll see," Garyon had said. I had laughed. I thought Garyon was exaggerating, or worse, playing a trick on me for his own amusement. But now, standing here, the truth had hit me like a warhammer. Sweat clung to my skin, and my muscles screamed as I tried to match his relentless speed. Galahad moved with unnatural precision, his twin blades flashing in the midday sun, forcing me backward with every strike. Each blow pushed me to retreat. Each movement demanded a new level of sharpness that I hadn't expected. Yesterday, I had underestimated him, made a fool of myself in front of my sister Elia and her maid. He had put me on the ground in less than 10 seconds. 10. The humiliation still burned in my chest. Today, it would be different. I had resolved to outlast him, to wait for the perfect moment and strike like the viper I was famed to be. Quit while you can, a baron. Garyon called from the sidelines. Galahad's never lost a duel. Lannister knights laughed, their jeers ringing in my ears. My sister and her maid were calling out, trying to rally me with words of encouragement. But their voices were distant. The only thing that mattered was Galahad, the boy in front of me. I shifted my stance as the duel resumed, my spear held high, my eyes tracking his every movement. The length of my weapon gave me the advantage of distance, or so I thought. But that space vanished in an instant as Galahad closed the gap with alarming speed. I thrust the spear toward him, but he dodged as if he knew my intentions before I had even acted. I followed up with a strike from the shaft, aiming for his head. It was a calculated risk, one I thought he couldn't possibly block. But he did, effortlessly. His movements were impossibly quick, like a breeze that could not be caught. No matter how fast or precise I was with my spear, Galahad was faster. He ducked and weaved, always at the perfect angle to avoid the blow by the narrowest margin. His footwork was light, almost dance-like. And with every second, I could feel my energy draining. Then he stopped. Removing his helmet, he revealed a calm, collected face, without a single drop of sweat. His green eyes glimmered with something like amusement. "You're good, Prince Oberyn," he said, his lips curling into a small smile. "But this is the end. It's been fun playing with a viper." And then, in a whirlwind of motion, he unleashed a 5-part combo that I had no hope of defending. His twin swords struck in perfect harmony, a deadly rhythm that disarmed me in seconds. My spear flew from my hands, and before I could react, Galahad had knocked me to the ground once again. I lay there, breathless and beaten, staring up at the clear sky. Once again, I had been bested by the boy. But instead of frustration or anger, a smile crept onto my lips. Galahad is an interesting lad. He moved with a skill and confidence far beyond his years. I closed my eyes. I had compared him to Arthur Dane, but he might be better. Chapter 25. Nighttime Bliss. Alicent Pova. A week later I waited eagerly by my window, my heart racing in anticipation. Moments later, I caught sight of him, a shadow in the moonlight, leaping from one rooftop to the next with the grace and strength only he possessed. A smile spread across my face as I recognized him. Richard. Taking a few steps back, I watched as he made his final jump. So effortlessly, he sailed the 50 feet from the neighboring building to my window. It was the 3rd floor, but that didn't matter to him. He landed silently on the window ledge, his golden hair catching the faint light as he turned to me with that familiar smile. I felt a warmth bloom inside me at the sight of it. "Ready to go, my lady?" he asked, his voice low, teasing. I smiled back, excitement bubbling up. Yes, my knight. It had been like this for the past moon, ever since he'd come back to me. The coldness that had once grown between us, the distance, gone. Every night, he would come to me, and we would explore the city together, just like we used to. Only now, there was something more. Richard was different, stronger, more confident, and somehow, more attentive. He gave me his time, his focus, perhaps even more than he had ever given Cersei. The thought of Richard giving his attention to Cersei used to stir something dark and uncertain within me. But now, with him here, his eyes focused on me and no one else, those feelings had melted away. There was no one else. Just us, the night, and the adventure that awaited. Richard had changed, but in a way I liked. He had returned to the Richard the first knew, the one I had always relied on. There was a maturity in him now, a strength that made him even more handsome. His body had filled out with muscle, and he'd grown taller, now towering at 6 feet. I was still getting used to it. His rapid growth surprised me at first, but it suited him. He stretched out both hands toward me, and without hesitation, I knew what he wanted. I leapt into his arms, trusting him completely as he lifted me effortlessly, holding me in a princess carry. My heart raced with excitement, not fear, as he jumped from the window, soaring through the air before landing smoothly on the rooftop. His new mutations, he had told me, made him capable of incredible feats, and though I had seen him do it many times, it never ceased to amaze me. "Where are we going today, Richard?" I asked, trying to smooth my hair, which whipped wildly in the air as he ran and leapt across the rooftops with the precision of a predator. Each jump, each landing was perfect, as if he could see exactly where to go before even making the move. I felt safe in his arms. There was nowhere else I wanted to be. He looked down at me with a smile, the wind brushing through his golden hair. "Let's go to the newly built theater," he said. "Tonight, they're putting on a play, Beauty and the Beast." I couldn't help but smile back. I'd read the play before, the one Richard had written himself. It still amazed me that he had not only come up with the idea for the theater, but that it had become such a success in lanisport. It was like everything he touched became something grander, something more than anyone could imagine. And now, to see Beauty and the Beast, his story, come to life filled me with pride. "Beauty and the Beast," I repeated, excitement bubbling inside me. "I can't wait." As we sped through the night, I couldn't resist making a playful comment. "You know, Richard, isn't Beauty and the Beast kind of like our situation?" I teased, remembering how the Beast in the story had an unnatural strength, much like Richard. He glanced at me with a mock-serious expression. "Are you calling me a beast?" he asked, his tone laced with humor. I giggled. "No, not just a beast. More like a princely beast," I said, smiling as I looked up at him. He really did look like the princes in the storybooks, the ones he had been creating for the theater. Richard grinned, his eyes twinkling. "Then that would make you a queen, since Belle marries the prince," he said with a soft laugh, casting a sideways glance at me. "Well, I wouldn't be the first Queen Alicent," I replied with a smirk, playfully referencing my namesake from history. We shared a laugh, the tension that had lingered between us long gone, replaced by the lightness of our conversation. For once, everything felt carefree, like we were just two friends joking and teasing as we always had. The night was ours. We arrived at the theater, its grand facade gleaming in the night, and noticed a line stretching down the street. People of all backgrounds eagerly awaited their turn to see the new play. An entrance fee of 1 silver coin stood between them and the magic within, but I could tell they didn't mind. Excitement filled the air, buzzing like the crackling energy before a storm. Richard, however, chose to veer away from the crowd, leaping into an empty alleyway. He preferred to avoid drawing attention to ourselves, but there was also a hidden door in the shadows meant only for VIPs, the actors, and the Lionheart family. He approached the door and knocked, and a slit slid open. A pair of eyes peered out, recognizing us instantly. The door swung open, revealing a man in his mid-20s named Jason. He was a soldier of the Lionheart family, tasked with overseeing the theater operations. "Welcome, boss, and Lady Alicent." He greeted us with a warm smile. As we stepped inside, the spacious room buzzed with activity. Actors and actresses moved about, rehearsing their lines and adjusting costumes, while stagehands prepared sets for the performance. The atmosphere was electric, filled with the thrill of creativity and anticipation. "Right this way," Jason said, leading us upstairs to a higher row designated for important Lionheart members. He stood by, eager to offer assistance, his desire to impress evident. "Can I get you anything? Food, drinks?" he asked, almost rushing to provide for us. Richard exchanged a glance with me, a smile playing on his lips. We ordered snacks. I chose hot dogs and fries, while Richard opted for fried chicken and pizza. Our drinks were orange juice for me and wine for him. As we settled into our seats, I gazed down at the bustling crowd below. Hundreds of eager patrons filled the theater, each one absorbed in their own anticipation, ordering their own snacks from the vendors. "How do you like the seating and hospitality so far, Alicent?" Richard asked, his green eyes sparkling with excitement. "I love it. I can see now why it's making so much profit for us," I replied, taking in the organized chaos of the theater. The successful business venture had gained the family profits, opening doors we had never imagined. We shared light banter about how delicious our meals looked and how much we enjoyed the theater. But soon, the chatter subsided as the lights dimmed, and the murmurs of the audience faded into an expectant hush. The stage lit up, and we leaned forward, our hearts racing with excitement as the play began, The Tale of Beauty and the Beast unfolded before us, vibrant and alive. I could hardly take my eyes off the stage, caught in the story, but my heart swelled with pride as I glanced at Richard beside me. This was his creation, and tonight, it was enchanting everyone in the theater. As the play unfolded, I was completely immersed in the world before me. The actors breathed life into their characters, particularly the Beast, whose fierce demeanor and vulnerable moments drew me in. Each growl resonated with deep emotion, a plea for understanding and acceptance. The actress portraying Belle was a vision of grace and strength, her clear, sweet voice filling the theater. I was captivated by her portrayal of curiosity and bravery, especially as she saw beyond the Beast's fearsome exterior. The audience hung on her every word, swept up in her journey. Their chemistry was palpable, transforming with every scene as Belle's compassion began to chip away at the Beast's walls. I leaned forward, completely enthralled. When they shared their first dance, bathed in golden light, it felt like time stood still. I could hardly breathe, my heart racing at their laughter and hesitant touches, which felt intimate, like a shared secret. "Look at how they move together," I whispered to Richard, my eyes sparkling. "It's like they're meant to be." He nodded, captivated, and the thunderous applause that erupted after the scene filled me with joy. The comedic moments, particularly the antics of the enchanted household objects, had the audience roaring with laughter, further pulling me into the evening's magic. As the story reached its climax, with Belle's unwavering love breaking the curse, I felt a lump in my throat. The heartfelt declaration stirred something deep within me, and I glanced at Richard, pride and admiration etched across his face. "Richard, this is truly amazing," I whispered. "You've created something beautiful." He turned to me, his gaze intense. "I had the best inspiration," he replied warmly. As the curtain fell and applause filled the theater, I felt a swell of gratitude wash over me. This moment felt like a turning point, not just for the theater but for us. The magic of the play stirred something within me, prompting me to voice the feelings I had held back for so long. My heart raced as I turned to him. "Richard," I whispered, my voice barely audible over the clamor of the audience. But I knew Richard could hear me. My heart pounded in my chest, each beat echoing my nervous anticipation. He looked at me, curiosity etched on his face, his golden hair catching the soft light. "Richard, I love you." The words spilled out before I could second-guess myself. For a moment, time seemed to suspend as surprise flickered across his face. I braced myself, fearing he might reject me. But then, a soft smile spread across his lips. "I love you too, Alicent." Hearing those words filled me with happiness, joy, and bliss. Heat rushed to my cheeks, and my pulse quickened, almost drowning out the applause surrounding us. In that moment, everything else faded away, leaving just the two of us in a world that felt impossibly intimate. Chapter 26. 3 Against 1. Third Pav. Next morning the sun hung high over Castley Rock's training yard, casting sharp shadows across the dusty ground as knights and squires gathered for a sparring match that had everyone talking. Laughter and murmurs floated in the air, but beneath it all, there was an edge of excitement, a sense that something special was about to unfold. The reason for this excitement: they were about to witness 3 seasoned fighters taking on a single young squire. Galahad stood at one end of the yard, calm and focused, his green eyes locked on the trio ahead of him. Opposite of Galahad, a Baron Martell, the Red Viper of Dorne, spun his spear lazily in one hand, a dangerous gleam in his eyes as he watched Galahad with the patience of a predator sizing up its prey. To his right, Darion Lannister, brimming with restless energy, shifted on his feet and swiped his sword around, eager for the fight to begin. Flanking them was Tygett Lannister, stoic and broad-shouldered, his great sword catching the midday light. Together, they were a formidable sight, 3 men known for their skill and ferocity, now preparing to face a boy who was not yet a knight. But Galahad was no ordinary squire. At 15 named days, he already stood taller than most normal-grown men, his height reaching 6 feet. His long golden hair, untamed and wild, framed a face as striking as any Lannister's, his piercing green eyes only adding to the resemblance. Whispers had followed his rapid ascent in the ranks of Castley Rock. Some called him a prodigy, others an enigma. Whatever the truth, he had become the subject of both fascination and speculation among the nobles and knights who watched him. As the match was about to begin, a hush fell over the yard, the air thick with anticipation. Galahad stood in the center of the ring, fastening his helmet with a smooth, practiced motion. His twin swords were buried in the ground before him, and with a steady grip, he pulled them free. Though blunted for the sparring match, they still held the weight and presence of real steel. They weighed like a feather. The match began deliberately, the three opponents moving cautiously as they surrounded him. Galahad remained calm beneath his helmet, his breathing steady. With a quiet focus, he stretched out his arms, extending the swords on either side of him, their tips aiming at his opponents. He was measuring their movements, calculating the distance, waiting for the perfect moment to strike and deflect. A baron struck first, lunging with the tip of his spear aimed squarely at Galahad's chest. Galahad slid to the side, his right sword flicking up to deflect the spearhead, pushing it away without losing his footing. He could feel Geryon approaching from the other side, his longsword slicing toward his ribs. Galahad spun, his left sword meeting Geryon's blade with a ringing clash. Tyget advanced next, his stance wide and powerful, attempting to cut off Galahad's escape. The weight of Tyget's sword came crashing down toward Galahad's shoulder, but Galahad stepped back, narrowly avoiding the blow as the blade struck the ground with a dull thud. Without missing a beat, Galahad countered with a quick jab of his right sword toward Tyget's midsection, forcing the larger man to retreat and reset his stance. For a while, a dance of steel ensued. The way Galahad blocked, dodged, and struck was a sight to behold. A baron, Geryon, and Tyget gave it their all, their attacks relentless, but fatigue was setting in, their movements slowing with each passing moment. The trio circled him again like in the beginning, they tried to regain their energy. After a while Geryon restarted the bout by stepping in, slashing high. Galahad responded by raising both of his swords to block, their blades sparking as they met. A baron saw an opening and lunged from the side, but Galahad's footwork had him twisting away just in time, leaving a baron's spear to glance harmlessly off his armor. The trio were working together, keeping up the pressure, forcing Galahad to stay defensive. Geryon pressed in close, his sword aiming for Galahad's legs. Galahad dodged and stepped forward, closing the distance, and parried with a sharp flick of his wrist. The sudden movement sent Geryon's sword wide, and Galahad followed through with a short, controlled strike to Geryon's wrist. The blades flat smacked against Geryon's gauntlet, sending his sword clattering to the ground. Before Galahad could capitalize, a baron attacked again, his spear darting in from above. Galahad raised both swords to catch the shaft between them, twisting it out of a baron's grip in one smooth motion. With a growl, a baron stepped back, now weaponless, while Galahad kicked the spear out of reach. Tyget surged forward, trying to catch Galahad off guard, his sword slashing in wide arcs. Galahad ducked under the first swing, his footwork tight and precise, using the momentum to sidestep the second. He parried the third strike with his right blade, then brought his left sword down with a calculated strike to Tyget's wrist, forcing him to drop his weapon. And just like that, it was over. The knights and squire erupted in applause, a mix of disbelief and admiration rippling through them. They had just witnessed something unheard of, a 15-named-old squire defeating 3 men, each of whom had skills equal to the finest knights in Westeros. A baron, Geryon, and Tyget stood there, chests heaving, sweat pouring down their faces. The fight had been relentless, fast-paced, a flurry of steel and footwork that had lasted a solid 10 minutes. Yet the victor, standing at ease, looked as though he had barely exerted himself. Galahad pulled off his helmet, shaking out his golden hair, a wide grin illuminating his face. "Ha ha, you see, even with the 3 of you working together, you still can't beat me." His voice rang out with an effortless calm, a playful challenge reverberating through the air. Remarkably, not a single drop of sweat clung to him, no trace of fatigue or strain, as if he hadn't just emerged from what would have been an exhausting battle for most. "Gods, Galahad, are you not tired?" Geryon gasped, struggling to catch his breath. Galahad chuckled, giving him a sideways glance. "Well, the morning runs really help," he replied casually. Every morning he would run as though his life depended on it. At first Geryon and the other knights had mocked him, calling it pointless. Now, after seeing how much Galahad had improved, they'd made it mandatory for all the knights and squires. Tyget, towering at 6 feet 5 inches and broad as a bull, still looked shocked. "How are you so strong?" he muttered, wiping the sweat from his forehead. His size had always been an advantage, but even he couldn't overpower Galahad when their swords clashed. "I eat a lot, lift a lot, and train a lot," Galahad responded, giving him a playful shrug. It was true. Most of his mornings and afternoons were spent eating and training. Over the past few moons, he had honed his technique and built up his strength until it felt like every movement was instinct. His progress was undeniable. But of course, none of them knew the real reason. The Wolverine template running through Galahad's veins, combined with his secondary evolution, made him practically unstoppable. He hadn't shared that little detail with anyone here. It was his secret, the key to why he could outlast and overpower even the best of them. "It doesn't make sense," a Baron cut in, his breath still labored. He was drenched in sweat, his agile, energy-consuming style having taken its toll. "I've studied the body at the Citadel. Even with training like yours, you should be sweating." Galahad flashed him a smirk. "Maybe I'm just built differently," he said, with a cocky grin. The three men exchanged glances, noting the confidence radiating from Galahad, even as they fought to catch their breath. Despite their exhaustion, a light-hearted mood lingered, the trio exchanging grins and jests as they recovered. "Shall we have another bout?" a Baron asked with a sly grin, twirling his spear once more. With a nod from the others, they squared off again, ready to test Galahad's limits once more. Tywin Povi looked down from the barracks overlooking the training yard, where knights and squires clashed under the shadow of Castle Rock. My eyes found Galahad, the young squire whose name had been on many lips as the tourney approached. A faint smile tugged at my lips. Galahad wanted to prove himself, to be knighted, eager to stand alongside those he admired. He had come to me, to Kevin, asking for the honor, and even Garyon and Tyget had pleaded on his behalf. But I refused. Not because he wasn't ready. No, Galahad was more than ready. His skill with the sword was undeniable. The finest warrior in Castle Rock, perhaps the finest I had seen at such age. But timing, as always, was everything. I wasn't going to knight him after a simple tourney victory, like Kevin would have. That would be a waste of potential. His knighting must be special, a moment that would be remembered, one that would make him grateful to me for the rest of his life. Before the tourney commenced, at the feast where every noble eye would be watching, that's when I would do it. His name would be known throughout the realm after that, and he would have me to thank. He would participate in the knight's melee, and I had no doubt he would bring prestige and honor to my house. Galahad's prowess in combat was undeniable. He had proven himself time and again in training. Before, I had worried about Galahad's lineage, which hinted at a possible connection to my father and his origins, which suggested him being a part of the Lionheart family. His Lannister-like features fueled speculation. Was he a bastard of our blood? Yet, despite my inquiries, I found no proof. As long as there was no solid evidence, he posed no danger to my family. What mattered most was Galahad's unwavering loyalty to House Lannister. He served us faithfully, and that commitment outweighed any rumors surrounding his background. The Lionheart family, meanwhile, continued to grow in prominence with each passing moon. I had forged a new deal with them, though the hooded man who managed their affairs remained elusive. Through Kevin, I maintained a line of communication with him. Orphan children from Lanisport carried our messages, forming part of a larger network I could only guess at. For now, the Lionheart family hadn't threatened House Lannister. Instead, they had proven to be quite beneficial, bolstering our coffers and helping to quell violence and crime in the region. Thanks to their efforts, Lanisport had become one of the safest cities in Westeros, a reputation that only served to enhance our standing in the realm. Satisfied with my decision, I turned away, clasping my hands behind my back as I began the walk to see my wife, Joanna, and my son, Tyrion. After all the work I had put in, I felt I had earned a moment's peace. Chapter 27. Ladies in Lanisport. Joanna Lannister. I sat inside the wheelhouse, the soft creak of the wheels beneath us a familiar sound. The wheelhouse was heading from Castle Rock to Lanisport. Cersei sat on my right, her golden curls spilling over her shoulders as she gazed out the small window, her focus lingering on the Squire Galahad riding just beyond the carriage. I had noticed that over the past moons, her attention had shifted from her brother Jaime to the young squire. Jaime sat to my left, casually leaning against the cushioned seat, his sharp green eyes absorbing everything beyond the window with his usual quiet confidence. The way he carried himself, even at this age, mirrored his father's poise. He was always watching, always learning, though with less formality than Tywin. Across from me was Nymeria, her dark hair framing her face in loose waves. She smiled warmly as she exchanged light conversation with her daughter, Elia, whose wide, curious eyes darted between the rest of us. They were discussing the best places to show me in the city once we arrived, their voices filled with excitement. They had been to Lanisport many times while staying at Castle Rock, while I had been confined within its walls for what felt like ages. Today marked my first journey beyond Castle Rock in many moons. After the long recovery from my pregnancy, I had finally convinced my husband to let me travel to Lanisport. The thought of returning to the bustling streets and breathing in the fresh sea air brought a flutter of excitement to my chest. It had been too long since I felt the world beyond the castle, and I longed for the sense of freedom that came with it. We weren't alone, of course. Outside the carriage, the steady clop of hooves and the occasional call from our escort provided a sense of safety. A Baron Martell, bold and vigilant, rode alongside us. My brothers-in-law, Garion and Tyget, were with him, their presence familiar and steadying. Garion, ever the playful one, would likely find some mischief before the day was done. Tyget, on the other hand, was more serious, always mindful of his duty. And then there was Galahad, the young squire with his golden hair and quiet demeanor. He had quickly gained Cersei's and Jaime's attention, but there was something about him that struck me as different. There was an air of mystery to him. Around the carriage rode 10 Lannister knights, their armor clinking softly with each step, a reassuring presence that reminded me of how carefully Tywin had planned this small journey. Even a simple visit to Lanisport was never without its precautions. The carriage swayed gently, and I took a deep breath, feeling anticipation and a strange sense of calm washing over me. Soon, I would be free of the rock's towering walls, if only for a short while. So, I said, breaking the comfortable silence, turning to Nymeria and Elia, what do you think I should see first when we arrive? Nymeria's face lit up with enthusiasm. Well, we could go to the theater, the bakery, the fast food market, the club, or the tea house. She rattled off the options as if Lanisport had become an entirely new city since I had last been there. I blinked in surprise, these places sounding so foreign. The city had changed so much in my absence. Elia, ever the practical one, gently interrupted her mother's excitement. Mom, calm down. It would take the whole day to explore the city. Let's keep it simple. Nymeria huffed in disappointment, folding her arms with a playful pout. Okay, she muttered, her tone light but clearly wishing we could see everything at once. I chuckled, unable to hide my amusement. Nymeria always had a boundless energy, and it was a joy to see her so eager. I think the theater and tea house would be perfect for today, I said with a smile. From what you've been describing, it sounds like quite a fun and relaxing experience. I wasn't particularly hungry, so the food market didn't interest me as much. As for the club, their descriptions had painted it as a rather hectic place, and with Cersei and Jaime here, I wanted to keep things more peaceful. I'd rather experience the city's excitement with them than leave them behind. Cersei and Jaime, oblivious to my inner thoughts, continued to gaze out their respective windows. They would love the theater and tea house, I thought. Elia Martell paused, tears welled in my eyes as I sat in the VIP area of the theater, high above the bustling crowd below. The cushioned seats were plush, the ambiance refined, but I barely noticed it. The tragedy unfolding on the stage had gripped my heart, leaving me breathless and overwhelmed. Beside me, my mother, Princess Nymeria, sat in rapt attention, her dark eyes brimming with unshed tears. She wiped at her face with a handkerchief, but the emotion was clear in her expression, her usual confidence softened by the tragedy before us. Joanna Lannister, seated to her right, was similarly affected. Her golden hair shimmered in the low light of the lanterns, and though she remained composed, her eyes glistened with tears. She dabbed at them delicately with a handkerchief, her focus unwavering on the final moments of the play. Even Cersei, always so proud and playful, could not hold back her emotions. She sat beside her brother Jaime, the tears streaming down her face as she watched the tragedy unfold. Her small hands clenched a handkerchief tightly in her lap, her golden curls framing her tear-streaked cheeks, though she tried to blink them away in an effort to maintain her composure. Jaime remained quiet, casting occasional glances at his sister, though his face was a mask of confusion. His eyes were a little watery, betraying the emotions he struggled to contain. The play had brought all us to tears, our hearts heavy with the weight of the lovers' tragic fate. We had been watching Romeo and Juliet, a tale of forbidden love, and now it was nearing its tragic end. On the stage below, Romeo stood over Juliet's lifeless body, believing her dead. The silence in the theater was heavy, broken only by the soft weeping of a few in the audience, including myself. Romeo's heart-wrenching soliloquy filled the air, his voice trembling with anguish as he spoke of love lost and dreams shattered. He took the vial of poison in his hands, his expression one of resignation and despair, before pressing it to his lips. My chest tightened as I watched him collapse beside her, his death unfolding with heartbreaking finality. Moments later, Juliet stirred, awakening from her false death only to find Romeo dead beside her. The gasp from the crowd mirrored my own shock. The actress's performance was so raw, so poignant, that it felt as though the weight of the tragedy crushed all hope. Juliet's grief was palpable as she clutched Romeo's lifeless body, her sobs echoing through the theater. She took his dagger, the sharp blade gleaming under the flickering lights, and in a final, devastating act of love, plunged it into her heart. The thud of her body hitting the floor was the last sound before the curtain began to fall, leaving the audience in stunned silence. The tragedy was complete. Two lovers, torn apart by fate and family, lay dead, and with them, any hope for peace. The somber finality of the play lingered in the air like a heavy fog, making it hard to breathe. I wiped my tears quickly, but my heart still ached. The theater was now hushed, save for the soft sobs that escaped from various corners and the occasional murmur of disbelief at the unfolding tragedy. My own handkerchief was soaked with tears, the damp fabric now uncomfortable against my skin. "Here, my lady," a voice from behind me whispered. A moment later, a fresh handkerchief was extended toward me. I looked up and saw Galahad, his usual composed expression softened by the flickering lantern light. How did he always manage to have so many handkerchiefs on hand? Over the past week, it seemed he was always prepared, as if anticipating moments like these. Not a moment ago, he had discreetly handed one to me, my mother, Nymeria, Joanna Lannister, and even to Cersei, all of whom had gratefully accepted. "Thank you," I said, taking the handkerchief with a small smile. He gave a brief nod, a glint of something warm in his green eyes before returning to his post, ever watchful. As I pressed the fresh cloth to my face, I couldn't help but be grateful for his quiet attentiveness. Cersei Lannister POVI was in the tea house sitting down at one of the circular tables, the seat slightly too big for me but comfortable enough. 4 chairs surrounded the table, occupied by me, my mother, her friend Princess Nymeria, and Elia Martell, my rival, sat across from me, her dark eyes brimming with curiosity and that ever-present hint of amusement. She was always trying to get between me and my brother Jaime's time with Galahad. Over the past weeks, I had noticed her hovering whenever we played together, and it grated on my nerves. She caught my glance, and her lips curled into a soft smile, as if she knew exactly what I was thinking. I tried to focus on the tea and cake in front of me, the soft sweetness of the dessert melting on my tongue. It wasn't as perfect as the ones Galahad made, but it was good enough. The tea helped wash it down, the warmth of it settling into my chest. "So, Joanna, how did you enjoy the play?" my mother's friend asked, her voice carrying over the soft clatter of cups and quiet murmurs of the tea house. I looked at my mother. She seemed truly happy, probably the happiest I'd seen her since father's return. "Yes," she replied with her usual grace. The food in the theater was delightful, and while the play was tragic, it was beautifully executed. It stirred something within me. Their conversation continued while I focused on my cake, letting the simple pleasure of it distract me from the noise around. But then, I heard Elia's voice call out, pulling me from my thoughts. "Squire Galahad," she said, her tone as pleasant as ever. I glanced up sharply, seeing Galahad approach her. "Yes, Princess," he responded, offering her a small nod. The way he said it made something in me tighten. That word, princess, it used to be just for me. Now, there were 2 more who held that title, Princess Nymeria and Princess Elia. I didn't care that it was their rightful title. I hated it. Do you have one of your cakes? Elia asked, her voice sweet and innocent, but it felt like a dagger to my chest. My heart raced, and my face flushed with warmth. Anger. She wasn't just taking his attention now, she was after his cakes, too. The ones that had always been mine and Jaime. Galahad pulled a small, wrapped cake from his pouch and handed it to her. I felt my heart sink, the bitterness welling up inside me. I wanted to cry. Then, as if sensing my turmoil, Galahad turned to me. Do you want some too, Cersei? Relief flooded me as I nodded, and he produced a pastry, the one I loved. It was as though he understood, giving me a silent reassurance that I still mattered. Wow, it looks delicious, Princess Nymeria chimed in, her playful tone lightening the mood. Don't you have one for me and Joanna too? My mother, who had been quietly enjoying her tea, glanced over and smiled at the sight of us, Elia and I savoring Galahad's cake like it was the best thing we had ever tasted. Because, truly, it was. And soon enough, my mother and Nymeria were sharing in that delight as well. For a brief moment, all the tension melted away in the sweetness of Galahad's pastry, though the rivalry between Elia and me lingered just beneath the surface. Chapter 28. Training Camp. Third POV 10 days before the tourney, the training ground bustled with activity as knights and squires jogged around the yard. Leading the group was Tyget Lannister, his stern gaze ensuring no one slacked off. But while most were catching their breath after the long run, Galahad, Richard, was still at it, sprinting past them again and again. He had been running even before them, though no one could say exactly how long he had started before the others. His stamina seemed boundless, far beyond anything expected of a boy his age. Sweat slicked his golden hair and dripped from his brow, yet his pace never faltered. When Tyget finally called for a break, the squires collapsed onto the ground, clutching their knees and gasping for breath. The knights stood tall as they breathed heavily. Rest for 5 minutes, Tyget commanded. Then we start sparring. After that, jousting practice will start, he added. Meanwhile, the knights and squires rested and exchanged jokes with each other, their spirits lifted by the brief reprieve. Laughter echoed across the training ground as they teased one another about their performances during the run and their upcoming spars. Tyget joined Garyon and Baron Martell on the sidelines. How long do you think he's been running? A Baron asked, nodding toward Richard, who was still circling the yard at a brisk pace. He's got the stamina of a Dothraki stallion. Garyon squinted, then chuckled. 2 hours, maybe more. Look at him, drenched like he's been in a storm. Tyget leaned back, shaking his head in disbelief. And he hasn't even been Kevin's squire for a year. How does he do it? Their eyes followed Galahad as he finally slowed to a stop, pulling off his soaked tunic. His body was lean and muscular, far more developed than one would expect for his age, with not a scar in sight. He twisted the tunic, and sweat poured from it in streams, pooling on the ground. A Baron let out a low whistle. Quite a sight, isn't it? Garyon grinned. With a body like that, he'd drive the women in the brothel wild. Shame he never joins us. Probably for the best, a Baron quipped. He'd steal all the whores. Garyon began laughing at the joke. Tyget rolled his eyes, getting to his feet. Enough of that. Time for sparring. He signaled to the men to gather their weapons and armor, the training about to begin in earnest. The sun hung high in the sky as Tyget, Garyon, a Baron, and the many knights and squires donned their armor and grabbed their weapons of choice. Excitement filled the air as they emerged from the barracks, energized and eager for the sparring sessions ahead. Meanwhile, Galahad stood apart from the crowd, stripped down to his breeches. His tunic, now rolled up and handed to a servant to dry, left his lean, muscular form exposed to the afternoon sun. He was already deep in his own training, focusing on his footwork as he shadow fought against an invisible foe. His movements were sharp and precise, unorthodox compared to the traditional training methods of the other knights. But no one dared to question his methods. After all, the 15-named lad had bested all the best seasoned fighters here. The clang of blunted metal weapons filled the training yard as knights paired up to duel. The melody of steel against steel echoed, punctuated by grunts of exertion and the occasional barked instruction from a senior knight. Squires watched closely, absorbing the techniques their masters demonstrated. In the center of the yard, a particularly fierce bout was unfolding. Tyget, Garyon, and a Baron had decided to face off in a free-for-all sparring match. Tyget wielded his massive greatsword with the power and precision that came from years of practice. Garion moved with agility, his longsword slicing through the air with grace. Oberyn, ever the agile and cunning fighter, spun and danced around them with his spear, striking swiftly and retreating before they could retaliate. The three of them sparring at full force was a sight to behold. Their weapons clashed with deafening force, each strike sending ripples of tension through the onlookers. Tyget's raw strength, Garion's speed, and Oberyn's finesse created a whirlwind of combat that had the knights and squires wide-eyed in awe. It was not often that such skilled fighters went all out in practice. As they fought, Galahad, still training on his own, paused for a moment to watch. His sharp green eyes followed their movements. Galahad, after a while of observing, asked for a new tunic. After putting it on, he went to the barracks, donned his armor and took 2 swords. He walked to the 3. "May I join in?" Galahad asked with a smirk, his confidence shining through as he approached the trio. The 3 stopped, panting from their bout, sweat dripping from their brows. Oberyn wiped his forehead, grinning. Whoa, it's a little unfair, don't you think? Can't you see we're tired?" Oberyn teased, his usual playful tone masking the respect he held for the younger fighter. It was true, they were all a little out of breath from their sparring. Garion laughed, nodding in agreement. "In the meantime, you should spar with the other knights. Give us old men a break." Galahad chuckled, stepping back. "All right, but when I come back, there better not be any excuses." Moments later, Galahad had gathered 5 knights to spar against him. Though they weren't at the level of Garion, Oberyn, or Tyget, their numbers alone should have made the fight difficult. The gathered crowd began to murmur, anticipating a spectacle. "How much you want to bet he takes them all down under 10 minutes?" Oberyn asked with a mischievous grin, already predicting the outcome. 50 gold says he does it under 10 minutes, Garion said confidently, his eyes on Galahad as the young squire squared up against the Lannister knights. "I'll bet 50 gold it takes him longer," Tyget countered, doubt still lingering in his mind despite what he had seen of Galahad's skills. Oberyn clapped Tyget on the back, clearly amused. "You're on." The spar began, and the 5 knights rushed Galahad at once, thinking they could overwhelm him with sheer numbers. But Galahad was calm, his dual swords moving with the precision of a master as he dodged, weaved, and parried their strikes. His footwork was impeccable, allowing him to slip out of danger before any of the knights could land a solid hit. He countered with swift, calculated strikes, not aiming to injure but to disarm and incapacitate. "Gods, every time I see it, I'm surprised he's not a knight already," Oberyn said, shaking his head in admiration. Garion nodded, watching Galahad with an appraising eye. "He has the potential to be the greatest. Greater than Aemon the Dragon Knight, Esser Barristan, or even Esser Duncan the Tall." Tyget, on the other hand, was beginning to regret his wager. His eyes followed Galahad's movements, and he knew it was only a matter of time before his 100 gold was lost. The turning point came when one of the knights overreached, leaving himself exposed. It was a critical mistake. Galahad saw the opening instantly, disarming him before the knight even realized his error. From that moment, the fight quickly spiraled out of control for the others. With 1 knight down, the remaining 4 soon followed, their defenses crumbling under Galahad's relentless precision. One by one, Galahad disarmed each knight, leaving them standing weaponless and breathless. The spar was over in just under 10 minutes. Oberyn chuckled, patting Tyget on the shoulder. "I'll take my 50 gold now, thank you." Garion smirked, holding out his hand. "And mine as well." All right, meet me later after," Tyget grumbled. He didn't have the coin on him at the moment, but the others were happy to wait. After some laughter and light-hearted banter, they approached Galahad, who had just stabbed his sword into the ground, removing his helmet. His hair, matted with sweat, clung to his forehead. Well, that was quite a show," Garion said, his voice full of admiration. "You ready to spar us now?" Oberyn asked with a mischievous grin, eager to face Galahad despite the squire's recent battle against 5 knights. He didn't care if Galahad was tired, he just wanted a shot at him. Tyget, standing nearby, greeted them with a grunt, his mood still sour from losing the bet. "Haha, what's with the unhappy face?" Galahad teased, his sharp eyes catching Tyget's expression. "He just lost a wager, that's all," Garion said, draping an arm around Galahad's neck. "Say, Galahad, instead of embarrassing us in another spar like you usually do, why don't you try jousting instead?" Galahad blinked, caught off guard by the suggestion. But I'm no knight," he stuttered. The idea of jousting had never crossed his mind, and to be offered such an opportunity surprised him. "Who cares? You're better than most knights anyway," a baron added with a wink. "Besides, since we can't beat you in a spar, give us a chance to knock you off a horse." Garion looked to his brother with a grin. "What do you say, Tyget? Is it all right?" Tyget, still brooding over his lost wager, couldn't suppress a smile. "It's fine," he said in a gruff tone, though there was a hint of mischief in his eyes. He was eager for a chance to get back at Galahad. "Let's see if you can keep up," Garion joked. Just like that, Galahad, who had only ever sparred with swords, would now be jousting. Unbeknownst to Garion, a baron, and Tyget, Galahad was skilled on horseback too. They had assumed they'd have the advantage, expecting to unhorse the young squire with ease. Little did they know, it was they who would soon be unhorsed. Chapter 29. The Dragon Dreams. Rhaegar POVI stood before the Iron Throne, the jagged swords twisted into the seat of power that I knew would one day be mine. Each blade glinted menacingly in the flickering torchlight. The throne loomed high above, its cold, sharp edges glinting ominously in the dim light of the hall. Everything was bathed in darkness, the once grand chamber now shrouded in an eerie, oppressive aura. The air felt heavy, thick with the scent of blood and iron. I slowly lifted my gaze, following the winding stairs that led to the top, where the king should sit. My heart pounded as my eyes settled on the figure slumped on the throne. King Aerys, my father. His body lay sprawled beneath the shadow of the throne, lifeless. 3 deep, savage claw marks tore across his chest, rending flesh and fabric alike. His entrails spilled from his stomach, staining the throne in a grotesque display of violence. A man, cloaked in darkness, descended the steps of the Iron Throne, his boots echoing ominously against the cold stone. His face was hidden beneath the heavy fabric of his hood, casting deep shadows where his features should have been. He seemed more specter than man, his presence thick with malice and foreboding. He stopped at the base of the throne, his presence heavy, shadowed in the dim light. Slowly, he raised a gloved hand, his finger pointing directly at me. "Your fate will be the same as your father's," the figure rasped, his voice low but powerful, filling the hall with an unsettling weight. "You're destined to die, destined to be damned." A cold fear gripped me, crawling down my spine like icy fingers. My hands shook, but I swallowed the terror and forced my voice to rise, trying to sound brave even though my heart was racing. Who are you?" I yelled, though the fear cracked my voice. The hooded figure tilted his head, as if amused by my question. "Who am I?" he repeated, his voice low and mocking. "I am he whom the old, sick, and dead fear. I collect the dead. King, queen, prince, princess, noble, merchant, small folk. Whomever you may be," his tone darkened, sharp as a blade, "I collect all of you." He paused, his next words dropping like stones into the still air. "I am the stranger." The name hung between us, heavy with meaning, as his words echoed in my mind. The stranger, one of the 7 faces of the gods, the bringer of death and the unknown. My heart pounded in my chest, but I couldn't shake his final words. "What do you mean my fate is the same as my father's?" I screamed, my voice cracking as panic set in. The stranger chuckled darkly, the sound filling the hall like an echo from the abyss. "Why are you laughing?" I shouted again, this time fear tightening my throat. Suddenly, I felt something wet beneath me. I looked down, and to my horror, blood began to rise from the floor, flooding the room as though a dam had broken. Hands, pale, cold, and wet, emerged from the blood, grasping at my legs, pulling me down. I kicked and thrashed, striking at the hands as they clawed at my body, dragging me deeper into the floor. "No, please, no," I begged, my voice hoarse from terror. "Tell me, how do I change my fate?" The stranger's laugh faded into silence, and then he spoke, his voice cold and final. "When the newborn cub is born, and the lion begins their feast, a knight will appear. Find him, and you may change your fate." "What does that mean?" I screamed, my desperation reaching its peak. The stranger vanished into a cloud of dark smoke, leaving only his ominous words echoing in my mind. The hands below me tightened their grip, yanking me down into the rising tide of blood. I gasped for air, but the thick, crimson liquid surged over my head, filling my lungs. My screams were lost in the gurgling depths, and no matter how I thrashed, the hands dragged me deeper. I kicked and clawed, but it was useless. The blood pressed in on all sides, suffocating me, drowning me. The weight of it crushed my chest, and my vision began to darken as the last of the air escaped my body. Esser Barristan Selmipov. I stood at the entrance of the tent where Prince Rhaegar Targaryen slept, my eyes scanning the horizon as dawn broke over the camp. The morning light painted the sky in warm shades of orange and gold, casting long shadows that stretched across the ground. I had just taken over from Esser Arthur Dayne, the newest member of the Kingsguard, who had kept watch through the night. Inside the tent, I could hear the soft rustle of fabric, a sign that Rhaegar was waking. But moments later, a scream pierced the morning air. I immediately rushed into the tent. Inside, I found Prince Rhaegar thrashing on his bed. His silver Targaryen hair clung to his pale face, now slick with sweat. It was a sight I had grown accustomed to. He had been plagued by nightmares for moons now. "Prince Rhaegar, wake up! Wake up!" I shook him gently, but he remained trapped in his restless dreams. Just then, the flap of the tent was pulled back. My fellow Kingsguard, Prince Lewin Martell and Esser Arthur Dayne entered, both Dornish, their skin tones reflecting the sun-kissed lands of Dorne. Arthur had a slightly lighter complexion and striking purple eyes, distinctive features of House Dayne. "How is the prince?" Lewin asked, crouching down to examine Rhaegar, his brow furrowed in worry as he scanned the prince's face for signs of distress. "He's fine, but he's not waking," I replied, my voice tinged with anxiety as I met Lewin's gaze. I knew how important it was for Rhaegar to find peace, and each nightmare only deepened my concern. "Arthur, grab a wet cloth," Lewin ordered, his tone leaving no room for hesitation. Arthur quickly dipped a cloth into a bowl of water and handed it to me, the coolness contrasting sharply with the warmth of the tent. I took the cool cloth and began dabbing it on Rhaegar's forehead, hoping to bring him back to reality. The fabric clung to his skin, and I could feel the tension in the air as we all waited for him to respond. Suddenly, Rhaegar sat up with a piercing scream, "Ag!" We all jumped back, startled by his outburst, the sound echoing in the small space like a warning bell. "Calm down, my prince, calm down," I said, patting his back to soothe him. I felt the tension in my own muscles release slightly as he began to breathe more evenly, his panic slowly dissipating. He took deep breaths, his pale eyes finally focusing on me, and asked seriously, "How long until we reach Lanisport?" "5 more days' ride on the Gold Road, my prince," I responded, trying to keep my tone steady as I met his gaze, hoping to ground him in the present. Rhaegar swung his legs over the side of the bed and stood up, shaking off the remnants of his nightmare. He gestured for us to give him space, his demeanor shifting from vulnerable to resolute. "When does the tourney start?" he asked, his expression serious and determined. 9 days, my prince," Lewin replied, his voice steady as he took a step closer, eager to support Rhaegar in whatever decisions he would make next. Rhaegar fell silent for a moment, deep in thought, his brow furrowing as he considered the implications of our journey ahead. Finally, he declared, "Gather the men after breakfast. I want us to ride for Castle Rock. We need to get there as soon as possible." "Yes, my prince," we all said with a nod. He had dismissed us and we were now outside the tent. "Do you think the prince will get better?" Arthur Dayne asked, concern etched on his face. I shared his worry, the same thought swirling in my mind. "We can only hope that it's just a nightmare," I replied, trying to sound calm despite the unease settling in my chest. The prince's suffering was not something I took lightly. "Both of you, get the men ready after breakfast. We move out," I instructed, my voice steady. They nodded in agreement and departed to speak with the other knights in our group, all sworn to protect the prince. Once they were gone, I let out a long sigh, the weight of my anxiety pressing heavily on my shoulders. I couldn't shake the feeling that something deeper troubled Rhaegar. His nightmares had started 3 moons ago, and although he never confided in anyone, I could see the fear in his eyes, a look that was both haunting and helpless. At least when the tourney in Lanisport had been announced, a flicker of excitement had ignited within him. He had been relentless in his pleas to King Aerys, his enthusiasm almost childlike as he begged for permission to attend. The king, tired of Rhaegar's whining, had relented, allowing him to go with a wave of his hand. He had sent me, Luwin, Arthur, and 50 other knights to escort the prince, some of us even slated to participate in the tournament. I hoped the thrill of the upcoming events would bring Rhaegar some peace, but a nagging doubt remained. Would the joy of the tourney be enough to overshadow the darkness lurking in his mind? I sighed. Only time will tell. Chapter 30. The Vipers meets the Roses. Princess Nymeria paused 6 days before the tourney. I stood at the tourney grounds, watching as the final touches were being made. Banners in red and gold fluttered in the morning breeze, the sigils of House Lannister displayed proudly as the hosts of the event. The sprawling grounds, nestled between Lanisport and Castle Rock, were already alive with activity. Knights in shining armor paraded their destriers, while squires and servants hurried to tend to their lords and ladies. The clang of hammers and the hum of conversation filled the air, creating a lively atmosphere as tents were pitched and the lists prepared. I was here with my son and daughter, Oberyn and Elia. Oberyn, bold and daring as always, was eager to witness the tourney, while Elia, more composed, observed the scene with sharp, discerning eyes. Several Martell knights followed behind us, their presence a reminder of Dorne's strength. Standing beside my children was someone who had clearly piqued both their interests, Galahad, the young squire whose charm and skill had captured their attention. I had personally invited him to accompany us after securing the Lannisters' permission. They had been gracious enough to allow it, and I was glad for the opportunity to observe him more closely. There was something about the boy, an intensity in those piercing green eyes, that intrigued me as well. I found myself glancing at him, biting my lip without even realizing it. His confidence was unmistakable, bold and self-assured in a way that made him stand out. He was exactly the type that could turn heads, even mine. I had seen him in the mornings, training without his tunic, his movements deliberate and powerful. His body, already muscular and perfectly sculpted for his age, hinted at the strength and potential he held within. The sight of him, so young yet so striking, stirred something warm and undeniable within me. I bit my lip harder, reminding myself not to let that warmth turn into something more. He was just a squire, barely 15 name days, but a part of me couldn't help but think that, if we were in Dorne, things might be different. I allowed myself a small, knowing smirk at the thought. Still, I pushed those feelings aside, forcing my desire to stay in check, not because of his youth, but because he was a companion to my children, Oberyn and Elia. They were laughing and smiling, their easy camaraderie clear as they chatted with Galahad. My son, Oberyn, seemed particularly animated, while Elia, more reserved, still offered a warm smile in response to Galahad's jests. "So, Galahad," I interjected with a teasing smile, stepping into the conversation, "I heard you'd be participating in the tourney. Would it be for the squire's melee? It's quite a shame because, from what I've seen, you're the equal of any knight." I had witnessed the sparring sessions between the Lannister knights, my son, and Galahad. The boy had bested them all, and it only deepened my interest in him. Galahad smiled, his confidence showing as he nodded. "Yes, Princess, though I wish that wasn't the case. I don't mind it." His words were sincere, showing a quiet acceptance of his position. I admired his loyalty, how he spoke with such respect for his place in the Lannister household, even if he had yet to be knighted. "But it's unfair," Oberyn chimed in, a mischievous smirk tugging at his lips. "If you were to join the knights' melee, I'd be betting on you to win. It'd be quite the sight to see the knights of the Seven Kingdoms get their asses handed to them by a squire." His jest brought laughter from all of us. As the laughter faded, an idea bloomed in my mind. I glanced over my shoulder at the Martell knights standing behind me. One of them, Santagar, was my lover, a knight of fine repute and skill. What if there was a way to change that? I said, a playful smile curving my lips. Galahad's brow furrowed slightly in confusion, his green eyes watching me intently. "By law, a knight can make a knight," I continued, my gaze flicking between him and the knights behind me. "If you wished it, I could have one of my Martell knights make you a knight right here, right now." I let the words linger, watching for his reaction, a smirk dancing on my lips. Galahad didn't answer immediately. His expression grew thoughtful, and I could see the weight of the decision settle on his shoulders. After a moment of contemplation, he looked up at me, his voice steady and respectful. "I'm sorry, Princess, but it would be dishonorable to House Lannister for me to be knighted by anyone other than Sir Kevin or Lord Tywin." His refusal was firm, but it came with a depth of loyalty that was admirable, even if it could be seen as overly cautious or foolish. His tone of honor, his respect for his liege lords, stirred something in me. It wasn't the answer I had expected, but it made him all the more intriguing. A baron, however, seemed less impressed, immediately contesting Galahad's decision with a raised brow and a barrage of questions. Elia, on the other hand, looked puzzled, unsure why anyone would refuse the chance to be knighted, especially when I had offered it so readily. I, though, respected his decision. Galahad's loyalty, as misplaced as it may have been in the eyes of my son, was a rare and precious trait. Even if it made him resist temptation, it made him all the more compelling in my eyes. Olenna Tyrell POVI sat on a high-backed chair, watching the activity in the tourney grounds with no small amount of irritation. My fool of a son, Mace, in his infinite wisdom, had decided that we would stay in lanisport instead of accepting quarters at Castle Rock, as was appropriate for a family of our standing. We had taken rooms at an inn called the Lionheart Hotel, a new establishment that, while certainly luxurious by common standards, was not suited for the Lord Paramount of the Reach and his family. The rooms were well furnished, the service impeccable, and the food unique, but it was still an inn, a far cry from the grandeur of Castle Rock's proper quarters. Mace, bless his simple heart, had taken a liking to the liveliness of Lanisport, charmed by the bustling streets, the food, and the common folk who fawned over him. He could not see the insult in staying at an inn, however grand, when we should have been rubbing elbows with the Lannisters themselves. I sighed, adjusting my skirts as I glanced toward the lists, where preparations for the tourney were well underway. My patience, much like the Reach's famed roses, had its thorns, and they were pricking at me now. Mace had no sense of propriety or ambition, which was why it fell to me to ensure House Tyrell's continued rise in the Game of Thrones. I looked to my right and saw my good daughter, Aleri Hightower, sitting with all the grace expected of a lady of her station. She was a decent match for Mace, though not nearly sharp enough for my tastes. Still, she played her part well enough, bearing the Tyrell name with dignity. Next to her, a servant cradled my grandson, the 8-month-old Willis Tyrell, his wide, innocent eyes staring at the colorful banners fluttering in the breeze. I only hoped the boy would not grow up to be an oaf like his father before him. I sighed again, the weight of my family's future ever present in my mind. My son returned, flanked by a contingent of Tyrell knights, his hands laden with slices of pizza, an indulgence he had grown quite fond of since our arrival in Lanisport. One of the reasons we had decided to remain in this bustling port town was its unique culinary offerings, and Mace had embraced it wholeheartedly. At 6'4", my son was at the prime of his youth, well built, with curly brown hair and warm brown eyes that sparkled with a childlike joy. Yet, I couldn't help but notice the way he relished every bite, and I feared that his recent appetite might lead to unwanted softness. Thankfully, he remained active enough to avoid becoming truly rotund, but I would have to keep an eye on him. "Are you done now, making your mother and your wife wait?" I said, an edge of annoyance creeping into my voice. Mace flashed that charming smile of his, filled with unabashed cheer. "Sorry, Mother, I was just enjoying the tasty pizza. I'm quite happy that they're setting up stalls near the tourney. Now I don't need to worry about going into Lanisport to enjoy it." I sighed, exasperation simmering beneath my calm exterior. "Let's just go to Castle Rock, shall we?" He nodded, his enthusiasm undiminished. Third paw of the two groups, Tyrell and Martell, walked toward each other without initially realizing it, but as they drew closer, the air between them grew thick with tension. The animosity between the Reach and Dorne had always run deep, but here, it was personal. Olenna Tyrell and Princess Nymeria had a history that went beyond their houses. Nymeria's sharp eyes caught Olenna's, and a slow, knowing smile spread across her face. Well, she purred, her voice carrying over the din of the tourney grounds. "If it isn't the old Rose. Olenna, I haven't seen you in a decade. Have you been hiding in your garden all this time?" The words were laden with false warmth, and Olenna's eyes narrowed. She, too, allowed a smile to curl her lips, though hers was as sharp as the thorns that represented her house. I wonder what the snakes are doing here among the lions, Olenna shot back, her tone calm but pointed. I've heard you failed in your betrothal offer. Understandable, coming from the likes of you. Nymeria's smile didn't falter, but her eyes darkened. Their rivalry, once centered around Daeron Targaryen, had left deep scars. Both women had lost that game long ago, but neither had forgotten the slights. My, Nymeria responded with feigned pity, still sharp after all these years. It's a shame those thorns of yours couldn't catch anything better than that lumbering oaf you married. But I suppose we all must make sacrifices. Olenna's expression remained composed, but a glint of anger flickered in her eyes. At least my house thrives, dear Nymeria, she said coolly, her voice softening to a dangerous whisper. Unlike some who squander their prospects in the deserts. The exchange had not gone unnoticed. Both groups slowed as the tension built, the barbs exchanged with the precision of duelists sparring with swords. Even Mace, normally oblivious, could feel the weight of the hostility between his mother and the Princess of Dorne. With one last, icy glance at each other, the groups passed, going their separate ways, but the words lingered, like the echo of a duel that had yet to see its final blow. Chapter 31. The Falcon, the Stag, and the Horseman. 5 days before the tourney, Jon Arryn Cove in the distance, the city of Lanisport came into view, its white stone walls glowing softly in the afternoon light. Beyond it, Castle Rock towered above the sea, its golden cliffs rising majestically like a lion guarding its domain. Closer to the city, the tourney grounds were already bustling with life. A colorful patchwork of tents stretched across the fields, banners of noble houses fluttering in the breeze, filling the air with excitement. After the long journey, the sight was a welcome relief. My men, though weary from the road, seemed to regain their energy at the prospect of rest, good food, and the spectacle of the tourney. We had finally arrived. Finally, we're here. Ned, let's race. First to the tourney grounds isn't a loser. Robert Baratheon's voice rang out, his usual boisterousness already filling the air as he spurred his horse ahead without waiting for a reply. I sighed, amused but exasperated. Robert, my ward, was a handful, a lad full of mischief and boundless energy. I had treated him like a son, trying to guide him, but the boy was as wild as the storm in his family's sigil. Beside me rode Eddard Stark, or Ned. Unlike Robert, Ned was quieter, more thoughtful, but I could see the spark of eagerness in his eyes as he watched his friend gallop ahead. He turned to me, silently seeking permission. I nodded, knowing the boy well enough by now. They were both only 11, full of youth and vigor, and deserved a moment of fun after such a long journey. Ned wasted no time. With a determined look, he urged his horse forward, chasing after Robert with quiet intensity. Though he wouldn't shout or laugh like Robert, I knew Ned's competitive spirit ran just as deep, perhaps even deeper, as I watched the two of them race toward the tourney grounds, so different yet bonded like brothers. I couldn't help but smile. Lord Arryn, is it wise to let them run off like that? A voice asked, laced with concern. I turned to my left and found Jon Royce, the Lord of Runestone, towering beside me. Jon was an imposing man, standing at 6 feet 8, his presence as solid as the armor he wore. He was one of the most honorable and loyal lords under my banner, a true embodiment of the values we held dear in the Vale. He would represent House Arryn in the upcoming tourney, and he wasn't alone. Lords Corbray, Redfort, Hunter, and other knights from the Vale would also be participating, each eager to bring honor to their houses. They'll be fine, I replied with a smile. Let them have their fun. They've earned a bit of reprieve after the long journey. Jon grunted, not fully convinced but willing to trust my judgment. All right, but if they stir up trouble, I'll see to it they receive a little punishment, he said with a hearty laugh, his deep voice booming. Ha ha, of course, my friend, I chuckled, amused by his protectiveness. With that, we continued riding at a leisurely pace toward the tourney camp. The excitement in the air was palpable, but for now, it was a moment of peace before the storm of competition. Steffon Baratheon POVAs. We neared the towering gates of Castle Rock, a familiar mix of excitement and impatience stirred within me. The fortress, carved from the golden cliffs, loomed as imposing as the man who ruled it, Tywin Lannister, my old friend. I was eager to see him again, to share a drink and talk, as we had done many times over the years. We had set up camp near the tourney grounds days earlier, leaving some of my men to keep watch. But now, I long for better accommodations, something more fitting for a Lord Paramount. A proper room within the rock was certainly a step above a tent, no matter how well appointed. Cassandra, my wife, was comfortably settled in the wheelhouse with her maids. I could hear their voices faintly as we rode alongside. Beside me was Stannis, soon to turn 10. A dutiful son, always serious, though I wished he'd loosen up a little more. Still, I was proud of him. He would grow into a strong leader one day, even if he was my second son. The air hung heavy with anticipation, not just for the tourney, but for the reunion with Tywin. As the gates creaked open, I nudged my horse forward, eager to enter Castle Rock and see what awaited us within. We crossed the stone bridge leading to the great gates, the sound of hooves echoing off the cliff walls. Ahead, a familiar figure approached on horseback. Though it wasn't Tywin, the golden hair and green eyes marked him unmistakably. Kevan Lannister, Tywin's brother. "Greetings, Lord Baratheon. Welcome to Castle Rock," Kevan said with a respectful nod, reining his horse in beside us. I returned the nod, a grin spreading across my face. "No need for the titles, Kevan. How's Tywin? And Joanna? Keeping well, I trust." My laughter boomed in the crisp air. "They are both doing quite well, thank you," Kevan replied, his tone composed as ever. "And the child?" I asked, my tone dropping slightly. "I've heard rumors. A dwarf, they say. Is it true?" Kevan's expression grew serious. "It's true," he said evenly. "But regardless, he's a Lannister. My brother will treat him no less than any son of the Rock." I scratched my beard, noting the subtle defense in Kevan's tone. He must have thought my question came from malice. "I respect that," I said sincerely, nodding at him. "May Tywin and the Lannisters prosper." Kevan's tense expression softened, and he gave me a small nod in return. No hard feelings. Just like that, we rode onward to the main gate of Castle Rock, the imposing fortress looming ever closer. After reaching the stables, we dismounted. I couldn't help but notice the sheer number of horses housed there, dozens, perhaps more. Other visiting houses must have arrived as well, likely drawn by the upcoming tourney. Once we'd handed our reins to the stable hands, I turned to Cassandra and Stannis. "You two head to the main hall. I'll catch up after I greet Tywin." Cassandra offered me a soft smile, her eyes sparkling with understanding. Stannis nodded quietly before following his mother toward the entrance. "Well then, Kevan, lead the way," I said, breaking the moment's tension. Without hesitation, he nodded and began to ascend the many stairs, his long strides carrying him effortlessly through the vast hall. We wound through the stone corridors, rich artifacts and portraits of Lannister ancestors lining the walls as we climbed. At last, we reached the door to Tywin's chambers. The guards stationed outside acknowledged us with nods as we approached. With a firm knock, Kevan announced our presence, and I felt a thrill of anticipation. Third Coven, the training grounds of Castle Rock, Galahad was a sight to behold atop his large black stallion, a magnificent beast gifted to him by Tyget after a particularly daring bet. The stallion's sleek coat glistened in the sunlight, its muscles rippling beneath the surface as it moved with an elegance that mirrored Galahad's own skill. Galahad's horse riding was nothing short of impeccable. Each movement was fluid and instinctual, as if his very essence melded with the powerful animal beneath him. Together, they danced through a series of obstacles, wooden barrels and hay bales intricately arranged into a challenging course, demanding agility and precision. He navigated them with ease, guiding his stallion with subtle shifts of weight and well-timed cues, embodying a harmony that few could achieve between horse and rider. A crowd of spectators, consisting of Lannister, Tyrell, Tully, and Martell knights, gathered at the edges of the training ground, their murmurs of admiration and disbelief weaving through the air. They watched with a mixture of awe and confusion. Galahad's methods of training were unconventional, to say the least. "Why does he insist on doing it this way?" a Tyrell knight whispered, scratching his head as he observed the bizarre drills, bewildered by Galahad's techniques. A Lannister knight shrugged, a grin spreading across his face. "Whatever the method, it works. You may not know, but the lad's become quite a legend in Castle Rock," he replied, pride evident in his tone. Pushing the stallion to its limits, Galahad launched into a particularly daunting obstacle, a barricade of logs stacked high. The stallion soared through the air, landing with a powerful thud that resonated across the ground. Cheers erupted from the onlookers, but he barely acknowledged them, his focus sharp on the next challenge ahead. He reveled in the thrill of the ride, the wind whipping through his golden hair, exhilaration coursing through his veins. As he finished the obstacle course, Galahad dismounted the black stallion, a swell of accomplishment blooming within him. Leaning close, he whispered to the horse as if it could truly understand him, the bond between them palpable. He patted the animal affectionately, caressing its glossy mane, feeling the raw power that lay beneath its muscular frame. "Bravo, quite a show there," came a voice from behind him. A Baron Martell clapped his hands, amusement dancing in his eyes as he watched the scene unfold. Beside him, Gerion Lannister shook his head in disbelief, slapping his cheeks as if to awaken himself from a dream. "You lied, didn't you? 5 days ago, you said it was luck. But you were a great horse rider all along," he said, his tone mingling playful lament with mock seriousness. "Ha ha, cheer up, you weren't the only one. Enhorsed," a Baron replied, giving Gerion a friendly smack on the back, laughter and warmth filling the air around them. "Well, you guys never asked," Galahad shot back, flashing them a cheeky grin. "Okay then, I'll ask. How does a son of a small folk know how to ride this well?" Gerion inquired, curiosity glinting in his eyes, his expression earnest. "I'm just built different," Galahad retorted, his trademark joke ready at hand. "I swear to the 7 gods, if you say that one more time," Gerion said, clenching his fist in mock frustration, making a playful gesture as if to threaten Galahad with breaking him like a stick. Galahad acted scared and changed the conversation. "I'm a little hungry. Instead of breaking my bones, why don't we fill our stomachs?" Galahad suggested, mischief lighting up his eyes. The laughter flowed freely between them, a moment of levity that stood in stark contrast to their competitive spirits. Just then, a shout broke through their revelry. "I yield." It came from a Tyrell knight, and the trio turned to see Tyget standing tall, a blunt sword pointed at the defeated knight. "Should we ask Tyget to join us?" Galahad suggested, hope glimmering in his voice. Gerion shook his head, a frown creasing his brow. "Nah, I don't think he's in a good mood," he replied, concern lacing his words. "Well, ever since he lost that joust bet, and, of course, the fine horse, he's been a bit sour," a Baron added, nudging Galahad playfully, the memory of Galahad's victory still fresh and stinging for Tyget. Galahad chuckled, shrugging off the tension that hung in the air. "Well, I guess it's just the 3 of us then," he said lightly, his tone breezy despite the earlier events. They all nodded in agreement, their camaraderie unbroken by Tyget's foul mood. As they turned to head toward the main hall, the promise of roasted meats and fresh bread awaited them. Chapter 32. The Feast and Knighting. Tywin Lannister Pav. The grand hall of Castle Rock hummed with life, filled with the murmur of noble voices, the soft clatter of plates, and the rhythmic clinking of goblets. Lords and ladies from across the Westerlands and beyond had gathered to celebrate the birth of my youngest son, Tyrion. But this was no mere feast. It marked the beginning of a tourney in lanisport, a spectacle I had arranged in honor of my son. Seated at the high table, I surveyed the room with a practiced eye. The hall was filled, just as I had intended. Lords and bannermen sat in their places, and allies from across the realm filled every seat. Their attentions were divided between the lavish food spread before them and the quiet whispers of intrigue swirling around the hall. A faint smirk tugged at my lips. Everything was unfolding as I had orchestrated. My ambitions, always carefully calculated, were aligning with quiet precision. To my left, Joanna cradled our newborn son. Tyrion slept peacefully, oblivious to the grandeur surrounding him. To most, this was simply a celebration of his birth. But for me, it was an opportunity to secure alliances and strengthen Lannister influence across Westeros. To my right sat Rhaegar Targaryen, the crown prince of the 7 kingdoms. His silver hair caught the light of the torches as he engaged my twins, Jaime and Cersei, in conversation. His soft smile and composed demeanor captivated them, and I could see how eagerly they absorbed his attention. This was the true centerpiece of the evening. Rhaegar's presence was key to my plans. As I observed the scene, a deep satisfaction settled within me. The feast progressed just as I had envisioned. Rhaegar's place at the high table was no mere formality. It was a testament to our growing influence, a symbol of what was to come. I could already see the future, Cersei at Rhaegar's side, ruling from the Iron Throne. Lannister gold and Targaryen dragons bound together in an unshakable alliance. For now, I allowed myself to savor the evening's success. The first course had been served, and the hall buzzed with laughter and conversation. The tourney would soon follow, bringing new opportunities to further my designs. And as always, I would be ready. Third Coven, the dimly lit Squire's Row, Galahad sat quietly among the other young men, his expression calm as he ate his meal. The chatter around him was steady, but he barely noticed it. His mind was elsewhere. He had been lost in thought ever since the previous day, when Kevan Lannister had told him he would be knighted during the feast. It was a sudden and unexpected honor, one that would elevate him into the ranks of the noble knights of Westeros. He had thanked Kevan as expected, bowing his head with the proper humility, but inside, his thoughts were spinning. This hadn't been part of his plan. Before this, he had intended to enter the tourney under a different identity. One of his men had already registered him as a mystery knight. The idea had been simple: compete in disguise, win glory, and only then reveal himself, earning admiration on his own terms. But the promise of a knighthood had changed everything. If Tywin Lannister wanted to make him a knight, Galahad could use that to his advantage. He didn't need to hide behind a mask. Why not let them knight him in front of everyone? Why not show the realm what he was capable of? He could still take part in the tourney, this time as a true knight. His victories would mean even more, and the name Galahad would be remembered. A small smile crossed his face as he thought about it. Yes, he would surprise them all. The realm wouldn't know what hit them. As the feast continued, the clinking of goblets and the hum of conversation filled the grand hall. A figure dressed in a fine tunic approached Galahad. Galahad. A familiar voice called out. It was Kevan Lannister, his mentor. Yes, my lord, Galahad replied, standing from his seat. The squire next to him gave a curious look, unsure of what was happening. Kevan smiled knowingly. It is time. My brother Tywin requests your presence by the high table. Galahad nodded and followed Kevan, leaving the curious glances behind as they made their way across the hall. The murmurs grew as they passed through the rows of knights, squires, ladies, and lords, all eyes now on them. Galahad remained calm. Tywin Lannister rose from his seat, and the room gradually fell silent. The Warden of the West walked down the steps from the high table with the commanding presence he was known for. He approached his brother and Galahad with purpose. Are you ready? Tywin asked, his voice cold and measured. Yes, my lord, Galahad responded, kneeling before him. Kevan handed Tywin his sword, and Tywin unsheathed it with a swift motion. The blade caught the flicker of the candlelight, gleaming as the hall's attention focused entirely on the moment. Everyone, witness today as I knight my brother's squire, Tywin's voice carried through the hall. Galahad, who has served my family loyally and earned our respect, shall be recognized as a Lannister knight. From this day forth, he will carry the honor of our name and participate in the tourney as one of our own. The room was silent, all eyes on the young squire kneeling before one of the most powerful men in Westeros. With those words, Tywin began the knighting ceremony. He rested the flat of his sword on Galahad's shoulder. In the name of the warrior, I charge you to be brave. The sword moved to the other shoulder. In the name of the father, I charge you to be just. He continued the process. Finally, after a while, Tywin raised the sword above Galahad's head. Arise, Esser Galahad. Galahad rose to his feet, now a knight of House Lannister. The hall erupted in applause. Richard Pav. After being knighted, I found myself sitting with the Lannister knights, surrounded by the splendor of the feast. The food here was magnificent. Roasted meats, fresh bread, and dishes that glimmered with rich sauces. The hall buzzed with a warm camaraderie, the atmosphere returning to its usual revelry. I could sense two familiar people coming toward me. You're finally a knight, Galahad, a Baron Martell said, his voice jovial as he smacked my shoulder with a friendly thud. About damn time, am I right? Garyon Lannister chimed in, sliding into the seat beside me. Both were quite drunk, and the scent of wine clung to them like a shroud. The other knights raised their goblets, cheering in agreement. Now that you're a knight, why don't we have a celebration, a drinking contest? A baron declared, his eyes glinting with mischief as he plopped down next to me. That's right, you should try some Arbor Gold, Garyon added, gesturing to a nearby servant. The servant hurried over, bringing a fresh bottle of the famed wine to our table. I hesitated, recalling my last experience with alcohol. A baron, noticing my reluctance, poured a generous cup and handed it to me with a grin. "Come on now, you're now a knight. You should drink like one," he urged, his tone playful. "Drink, drink, drink." Garion began to chant, joined in by the other Lannister knights at the table, their enthusiasm infectious. With a sigh, I raised the cup to my lips and took a hearty gulp. The wine was smooth, the sweetness wrapping around my senses. I felt no effects and smiled. Seizing the moment, I reached for the bottle a baron had poured from and tilted it back, chugging the entire contents in one go. A hush fell over the table as the knights stared at me in shock. "Shaw," I sighed in satisfaction after downing the whole bottle, a triumphant grin spreading across my face. "What in the gods? You just finished the whole bottle," a baron exclaimed, his surprise palpable. "I'm just built different," I replied with a cocky smile, reveling in the rush of adrenaline and camaraderie. "Okay, you're getting it," Garion laughed, his eyes sparkling with mischief as he leaned in, preparing to wrestle me. The last time he had given me a joking warning not to repeat those words, and now he seemed ready to challenge me again. As Garion lunged forward, I met his attack with a dodge, just like that he tried to catch me but failed. Laughter came from a baron at our table. Suddenly, the laughter and revelry at our table fell into a hush. Attention hung in the air as all eyes turned toward the source of a new voice. "Hello there, Garion, a baron, and Galahad, right?" The tone was soft yet jovial, cutting through the din of the hall like a warm breeze. I twisted in my seat, curiosity piqued, to find the crown prince of the Seven Kingdoms, Rhaegar Targaryen, standing just behind my chair. His silver hair shimmered like moonlight, and his presence commanded attention effortlessly, even amidst the gathered knights. A knot formed in my stomach. Just when I thought I had everything meticulously planned, here came another shift, another unpredictable variable. The prince's gaze lingered on me, his expression unreadable. I felt the weight of his attention, sensing that he had purpose in approaching us. "Congratulations on your knighthood, Galahad," Rhaegar said, his voice smooth and sincere, offering me a nod of acknowledgement. The knights around me exchanged glances, their expressions a mixture of surprise and intrigue. A baron grinned, clearly delighted by this unexpected encounter, while Garion raised his eyebrows, as if wondering what the prince's intentions were. "Your presence here makes the celebration all the more meaningful," a baron replied, his usual bravado shining through, trying to maintain the festive spirit in the face of this royal interruption. "Indeed," I added, attempting to mask my own unease. "It is an honor to be in your company, your highness." "May I join you?" Rhaegar asked, gesturing to the empty seat beside me. With a quick glance at my companions, I nodded, feeling a mix of excitement and apprehension. "Of course, your highness. We would be honored." As he settled into the seat, I noticed how the hall seemed to shift around him. Conversations resumed, yet an unspoken reverence lingered in the air, as if everyone was acutely aware of the crown prince's presence among us. "Thank you," Rhaegar said, his calm demeanor a stark contrast to the raucous atmosphere. He surveyed the table, taking in the revelry and the plates brimming with food. "It seems you've started a celebration." A baron grinned, pouring a fresh cup of Arbor Gold and sliding it toward Rhaegar. "We were just about to engage in a drinking contest to honor our newly knighted friend here. Care to join us, your highness?" Rhaegar raised an eyebrow, a ghost of a smile playing on his lips. "A drinking contest? Now that sounds like a worthy challenge." He accepted the cup with a graceful movement. "Cheers," Garion shouted, raising his own goblet high. The other knights followed suit, clinking their cups together in a raucous cheer. "To Sir Galahad," a baron proclaimed, his voice ringing through the hall. "To Sir Galahad," the knights echoed, their voices blending into a cacophony of revelry as we downed our drinks. Rhaegar, his demeanor light yet focused, embraced the lively atmosphere around us. He raised his goblet in response to our cheers, taking a generous swig of the Arbor Gold before setting it down with a satisfied smile. Leaning closer, he lowered his voice so only our table could hear. "You've shown great promise, Galahad," he said, his gaze intensely locking onto mine. "It's not often one sees such potential in a new knight. What do you aspire to achieve with your knighthood?" After hearing his question, I paused, weighing my words carefully. "I aim to protect those who cannot protect themselves," Your Highness, I said, my voice steady. To serve honorably and uphold the values of chivalry. A pleased smile spread across Rhaegar's face. A noble goal indeed, the realm needs more knights of such conviction. The atmosphere at our table shifted subtly, the excitement of our earlier drinking contest blending with a deeper sense of respect and camaraderie. Another round, a baron called out, gesturing for the servant to refill our goblets. Let's drink to honor, valor, and the bonds of friendship. As the wine flowed, laughter and lively conversation filled the hall once more. Chapter 33. The Dance with Two Ladies. Elia Martell Pav. The hall was alive with music and laughter, the scents of spiced wine and perfume mingling in the air. Lords and ladies moved gracefully across the dance floor, their gowns and doublets a swirl of vibrant colors that flowed with the music. My mother, radiant in her gown of martell oranges and golds, danced, her smile warm and inviting as she turned with her partner. I had already danced with several lords and noble sons, some eager, some charming, but none had captured my interest for more than a moment. Now, I found myself at the edge of the hall, waving away the offers that still trickled in. A polite smile remained on my lips. My gaze wandered, no longer held by the flashing colors and movement of the dance floor. Across the hall, my brother Abarin was surrounded by his usual group of friends. Their laughter rose above the music, carefree and unrestrained. It was hard not to smile at the sight. Abarin had that rare ability to make any room feel alive with his presence, and tonight was no exception. Yet, I noticed the slight unsteadiness in his movements, the hint of a stumble that told me he'd had a bit too much to drink. Sitting with him were two golden-haired men, one of whom I recognized as the brother of the Lord Paramount. The other was Galahad, the newly knighted squire who had become a familiar face over the past moon. When I first met Galahad, I'd been wary, intrigued by his quiet demeanor and the way he always seemed to blend into the background. But as time passed, we had become friends, and I had come to appreciate the little ways he showed he cared, always ready with a handkerchief, a sweet cake, or a gentle word to lift the mood. He had a talent for making even the simplest moments feel lighter, and I couldn't deny the warmth that thought brought me. He had surprised me with other talents too, singing, cooking, even sewing. At first, I had laughed, finding his skills amusingly out of place. But when he spoke of his past, of surviving alone on the streets, my amusement faded, replaced by a quiet respect. He had lived a life far removed from the one I knew, and it made me see him in a new light. Beside him sat Prince Rhaegar, his silver hair catching the glow of the chandeliers, making him seem almost otherworldly. There was a quiet grace to him, an ease that set him apart even among a room full of nobles. When he had arrived a few days ago, my mother's eyes had lit with ambition. She had envisioned him as a potential suitor for me. I understood what my mother wanted, what she expected of me. Rhaegar was handsome, princely, a future king in all but name. It was the kind of opportunity most would leap at without hesitation. But as I watched him, I felt no such urgency. I didn't know him, not truly. Yes, he was striking, yes, he carried himself with a quiet dignity, but I had yet to see the man behind the prince. I wanted to watch, to listen, to understand who he was before I made any decisions. With that thought, my mind was made up. If my mother had her way, there would be time enough to speak to Rhaegar. Tonight, I would go where I felt comfortable, where the laughter was familiar, where Galahad's quiet smile and Abarin's boisterous laughter called to me. I smoothed the folds of my dress, a familiar motion that steadied me, and took a deep breath. Not out of nerves, but anticipation. Then, with a small, determined smile, I rose from my seat and crossed the hall, weaving my way through the throng of dancers. My path was clear, and I made my way to where my brother's group stood, my steps unhurried, my heart lighter with each one. I moved closer to the table, surprised by the scene that greeted me. Bottles were scattered everywhere on the table, and several knights lay slumped over, passed out, their heads resting heavily on the table. My brother, however, was still barely conscious, laughing loudly. One hand gripped a cup, while the other hung loosely around Garion's shoulders. Garion, who had fallen unconscious moments before I arrived, was snoring softly, his head lolling to the side. Prince Rhaegar didn't look much better. His violet eyes were half shut, blinking sluggishly, lost in a haze of drunken fatigue. He didn't even notice me standing here. I sighed. My plan to observe the prince's character would have to wait for another night. I signaled to the servants hovering nearby. Take my brother to his quarters, and Sir Garyon as well. See that the prince is escorted too, I instructed. They nodded and quickly moved to fetch more help. As one servant reached for the prince, a voice cut in. There's no need. I'll take it from here, said Sir Arthur Dane, his movements smooth and assured, the confidence of a seasoned knight evident in every step. A fellow Dornishman, he gave me a respectful nod as he gently steadied the swaying Prince Rhaegar. Princess Elia, thank you for your concern, he said, a touch of gratitude in his voice as he pulled the prince to his feet. It's a pleasure to be of help, Sir Arthur, I replied with a nod, acknowledging his presence with the same courtesy. No, I must recruit, knight, Rhaegar slurred, his words a jumbled mess. You're drunk, my prince. There'll be time for that another day, Arthur said patiently, his tone indulgent yet firm as he guided the stumbling prince away. With my brother, Garyon, and Rhaegar all led from the hall, each the victim of his own excess, the servants cleared away the remains of the revelry, but Galahad remained. He watched me with a steady gaze, his green eyes clear and sharp, taking another measured sip from his cup. For a moment, I suspected he might be as drunk as the others, but his quiet, amused expression told me otherwise. He was perfectly sober. It's a surprise to see you still standing, Galahad, I said, glancing at the abandoned bottles of Arbor Gold scattered across the table. Were you all competing to see who could drink the most? His laugh was easy, his smile wry. Something like that, he said, setting his cup down. Though it looks like I had the better sense to stop before it got the best of me. I found myself smiling at his lightheartedness, feeling the tension of the evening ease a little. Then, to my surprise, he stood up and stretched, a hint of mischief in his eyes. He extended his hand to me, a playful glimmer in his gaze. It seems you're finally free, Princess of Dorne. Would you grant a lowly knight the honor of a dance? I blinked, taken aback by his boldness, but I felt a warmth bloom inside me at his straightforward manner. Just one dance, I said, matching his jest with my own. Consider it your reward for becoming a knight. His grin widened, and we made our way to the dance floor. Finding an empty space, I prepared myself to lead, assuming Galahad would stumble through the steps. Instead, he moved with surprising ease, matching the rhythm effortlessly, his confidence adding yet another unexpected layer to the lad I thought I knew. As we moved together, he started humming, a soft, lilting melody that caught me off guard. The tune was unfamiliar, peaceful yet tinged with a hint of melancholy, as if he were pulling it from a place deep inside. His voice was low and steady, weaving seamlessly with the music filling the hall, and I found myself leaning in, captivated by the rise and fall of each note. What are you humming? I asked, curiosity getting the better of me. A song I've been writing for someone I love, he replied, his gaze locking onto mine with an intensity that took my breath away. My mind raced. What was he suggesting? Did he mean me? My heart began to pound in my chest, and I braced myself for the inevitable rejection, knowing I didn't see him that way. She's a childhood friend of mine. She's in Lanisport. I get to see her from time to time, he continued, breaking the spell. On one hand, a wave of relief washed over me. On the other hand, his answer didn't satisfy me. Maybe I was unsatisfied because he's still keeping secrets. Would you like to hear the song? You could tell me what you think, he offered, his eyes bright with anticipation. I nodded, recalling the way he sang to the twins, Cersei and Jaime. I knew he had a beautiful voice. He began to sing, his tone melancholic and soft, just for me. As we danced, I felt myself being drawn into the emotion of the song, each note washing over me like a tide. With every verse, my body grew weaker, and by the end, tears flowed from my eyes. It was beautiful and heart-wrenching, and I found myself lost in the depths of his words and the warmth of his presence. Alicent Povi waited in the gardens of the Lionheart mansion, the cool night air wrapping around me like a gentle shroud. Dressed in a warm fit, I settled onto a comfortable bench surrounded by oil lamps perched atop poles, their flickering light illuminating the garden in a soft, golden glow. These lamps had been designed by Richard, with the help of the builders who worked for the family, making the space feel both inviting and secure. While I sat reading a book, my eyes occasionally flicked up to the path, eager for his arrival. I wasn't alone. Lionheart guards patrolled the grounds, their vigilant presence ensuring no intruders dared approach. As I became engrossed in the story in the book, a familiar presence suddenly darkened my vision. "Richard," I exclaimed, a wave of excitement washing over me. "Yes," he replied, playfully releasing his hands from my eyes. I turned to face him, and my heart leapt at the sight of my handsome prince. Without hesitation, I hugged him tightly, inhaling his familiar scent. He smelled of alcohol, and a flicker of worry crossed my mind. Was he drunk? But as I cupped his face in my hands and studied him, I realized he was sober. "Did you finish admiring my face?" he joked, a teasing grin on his lips. I let go, unable to suppress my smile. "Yes," I replied, my heart fluttering. He sat beside me on the bench, and I placed my book down on the other side, my full attention now on Richard. His body radiated warmth, a welcome reprieve from the cool night. "How's the family?" he asked, his tone sincere. "Quite well. The new expansion is going great. The capos and soldiers are branching out to other cities," I responded, eager to share. I detailed our progress, mentioning how my mother, now the new consigliere, has been taking on more responsibility. I also explained that with her increased workload, my mother had made me her personal assistant, giving me a deeper insight into the family's dealings. "I've begun helping with the family business." "Good work, Alicent. I'm proud of you," he said, wrapping his arm around me. His words made my heart swell, and I hugged him tighter, feeling the warmth of his presence seep into me. We continued to talk, laughter and light banter filling the air. I learned about his day, including his dance with the Princess of Dorne at the feast earlier. I felt a little jealous and immediately wanted to dance with Richard. The thought of him twirling the Princess of Dorne stirred something deep within me, igniting a yearning to share that same joy. "May I dance with you?" I asked, pulling my head from his shoulder, a hopeful gleam in my eyes. "Of course, Alicent," Richard replied, his smile infectious as he took my hands. We stood from the bench, seeking an open spot in the garden where the light danced around us. As we began to sway, the rhythm felt awkward at first. I stumbled over my own feet, unsure of the steps. But Richard patiently guided me, his gentle encouragement helping me find my footing. Soon, he began to hum a happy tune, and we danced to our heart's content, laughter bubbling between us as I finally got the hang of it. When his voice slowed and the dance and song came to an end, he lifted my chin with a tender touch, leaning in closer. I could feel my breath hitch in anticipation as our lips met, and we kissed affectionately, the world around us fading away in that perfect moment. Chapter 34. Axe-throwing event. Third Poven. The open field of the tourney grounds. The air buzzed with anticipation as the final two contestants squared off. On one side stood an Ironborn, a grizzled, sea-weathered man with a look of grim determination. Opposite him was a young knight, Galahad, whose meteoric rise through the contest had caught everyone by surprise. More than 100 men had entered the axe-throwing event, but now only these two remained. The stands were filled with spectators, nobles lounging beneath their banners and small folk crowded together, eager for the spectacle. The rules were simple: 5 axes per man, 10 paces from a marked wooden dummy. A hit to the body earned a single point, while a strike to the head was worth 3. For the final, though, the stakes had been raised, 10 axes each, and the distance doubled to 20 paces. Galahad stood in the marked circle, his gaze fixed on the targets. The crowd had taken to calling him Sir Axehead, a nickname born from his flawless record in the earlier rounds. His eyes, sharp as a hawk's, never missed, and his throws always found their mark. The chants echoed from the crowd, Sir Axehead. Sir Axehead. Even some of the nobles joined in, intrigued by the young knight's skill. "Come on now, boy, throw ye shits already." The Ironborn's rough voice carried across the field. 5 paces away, he was glaring at Galahad, hoping to shake his focus. But Galahad's expression remained calm as he ignored the taunt, his attention locked on the dummy. He took a deep breath, feeling the weight of the first axe in his hand. With a smooth, practiced motion, he let it fly. The blade spun end over end before burying itself squarely in the dummy's head. 3 points, the herald announced, his voice carrying over the cheers of the crowd. A satisfied smile tugged at the corner of Galahad's lips. He glanced over at the Ironborn, who was now preparing for his own throw. Galahad saw an opportunity. His opponent had tried to rattle him, so he decided to return the favor. As the Ironborn raised his arm to throw, Galahad seized the moment. Mum's a smelly whore," he called out, his voice carrying over the hushed crowd. The taunt hit its mark just as well as any axe. His opponent flinched, throwing off his aim. The axe veered off course, barely grazing the edge of the dummy. 1 point. The herald announced, his tone flat. The Ironborn's face twisted with fury. "The fuck you say, you brat?" He spat, his anger barely contained. The crowd murmured, a few gasps and laughs rippling through them. Galahad just smiled and ignored the man. Without looking at him, he reached for another axe, tossing it with a casual flick of his wrist. The blade soared straight, embedding itself dead center in the dummy's head. 3 points. The herald declared, and a cheer rose from the onlookers. The back-and-forth banter continued as the competition went on. Each time the Ironborn threw, Galahad needled him with another taunt, jibes about his aim, his looks, even his manhood. The crowd roared with laughter at each exchange, while the Ironborn's face grew redder, his movements more frantic. Through it all, Galahad's throws remained effortless and precise. With each toss, he could hear the Ironborn's heartbeat quicken, the erratic thud-thud of rising frustration and fury. He knew he had the man rattled, and that was all he needed. Each axe Galahad released found its mark on the dummy's head, solid, certain, and without hesitation. The Ironborn, by contrast, was falling apart. His throws were inconsistent. He overcompensated in one round, barely hit the dummy in another. His face flushed with each failure, and his breath came in angry huffs. There was no chance for the man, not from the beginning. Galahad's Wolverine-honed reflexes and razor-sharp eyesight made him nearly unbeatable. The competition was already over before it had truly begun, but Galahad enjoyed toying with his opponent, savoring each throw. By the time the final round arrived, the Ironborn's fury had turned to despair. He had given it his all, but Galahad had been perfect, every single axe a flawless hit. The crowd knew it too, their cheers growing louder with every one of Galahad's throws. He had doused the man's anger with each successful strike, leaving only the cold, undeniable truth of defeat hanging in the air. The winner of the axe events, winning by 30-18, representing House Lannister, is Sir Galahad. The herald announced. The crowd erupted in applause, their cheers echoing across the field as Galahad stood victorious, the name, Sir Axehead, on every tongue. After the victory, Galahad approached the Ironborn man, extending his hand. Though he'd taunted the man mercilessly during the contest, it had all been in good spirits. To his surprise, the Ironborn didn't hold a grudge. Instead, he offered a hearty laugh, acknowledging the young knight's remarkable skill. "The name's Ragnar," the Ironborn said, shaking Galahad's hand with a firm grip. Quite a shit talker. Too bad my words didn't rattle ya. And you're quite the axe thrower," Galahad replied, genuine respect in his voice. "If it had been anyone else, you would have won today." Ragnar chuckled, his eyes crinkling with good humor. "Well then, Sir Axehead, I think I'll drown my defeat in ale tonight." Good fight. They shook hands once more, parting with smiles, and Galahad made his way toward the herald to claim his prize. But before he could reach the stand, two figures tackled him playfully from behind, Garion and a Baron, both grinning ear to ear. They had been Galahad's staunchest supporters throughout the tournament, spreading his nickname like wildfire among the crowd. Laughing, the three friends made their way out of the tourney grounds, the name, Sir Axehead, ringing triumphantly in the air behind them. Richard Povi had separated from Garion and a Baron. They were off to the brothels now, their cheers and laughter still echoing in my ears as they went to celebrate my victory in their own way. They'd promised they'd return in time to support me in the archery tournament, and I knew they would. They never missed a chance to cheer me on. I now strolled through the lively tourney grounds, my mood lifted after winning the first event of the day. The morning had begun with the axe-throwing contest, and my victory had been swift and decisive. Each step I took felt lighter, the thrill of competition still coursing through my veins. Only the most rewarding events caught my interest, and the 2,000 gold dragons I secured with my win were proof enough that my approach was the right one. I'd had the official document signed to confirm my prize and pocketed 100 gold dragons for immediate use. The rest would wait until the tourney's end. Too much gold on hand was an invitation for trouble. The second challenge I'd chosen was the archery contest, and to prepare, I made my way toward the blacksmith's area, where the air was thick with the scent of hot iron and the din of clashing metal. I knew precisely where I needed to go. As I approached, my eyes locked onto a familiar figure, the old blacksmith, Corlos, issuing orders to his apprentices while hammering at a heated piece of iron. Corlos was no ordinary smith. He was a made man in the family, someone I had helped many moons ago when he sought justice for his daughter. He was a man who owed me a favor he repaid through loyalty. "Hello there, Corlos," I called out, my voice carrying above the clamor. He looked up, and a broad smile split his soot-streaked face. His laughter was warm and genuine. "Ho ho, Sir Galahad, what an honor to have you here," he said, putting down his hammer and offering me a firm handshake. Corlos was one of the few who knew the truth behind my disguise as Galahad. I had positioned him at the tourney to set up a forge, not only to earn profits but to act as eyes and ears amidst the throng of visitors. Behind Corlos, 5 of his apprentices labored at their stations. Associates in the family, they greeted me with respectful nods. "I'm in need of a bow," I told Corlos. "The one I commissioned, have you completed it?" My lord, it's ready," he confirmed, his tone suddenly all business. "Follow me." We stepped inside the tented forge, moving past the noise and into a smaller, more secure space. There, 2 young men stood guard, associates tasked with protecting the valuable items inside. They straightened immediately upon seeing me, bowing as I approached. Both were well armed, their armor of decent quality, and swords sheathed at their sides. "Step aside, lads," Corlos said with a chuckle, his confidence evident. He led me to a chest at the far end of the room, its polished wood glinting in the filtered light. "Here it is," he said, opening the lid to reveal the bow. It was a longbow, simple and unadorned, but with an elegance that spoke of quality. Crafted from the wood of a weirwood tree, its pale, almost ghostly color gave it a distinct look. The hemp bowstring felt sturdy under my fingers, it promised durability and strength. I took the weapon from Corlos, testing its weight. It was heavier than most bows, designed to handle a draw weight that exceeded 200 pounds, something that would test the strength of any normal man. I pulled back the string with ease, feeling the power humming beneath the tension before releasing it gently. The force was impressive. This was a weapon meant for accuracy and lethality. "It's perfect," I said, allowing a rare smile to slip across my face. "Glad to hear it, my lord," Corlos said, clearly pleased. "I did my best to match your specifications." "You did well," I replied, turning toward the exit with the bow still in hand. "Stay vigilant. I expect any useful news to find its way to me quickly. And also, I'll be back for my armor and weapons for the melee and joust on the morrow," I finished, my tone firm. Corlos nodded. I then left the tent and the forge. The roar of the tourney grounds washed over me again as I stepped into the sunlight, the new longbow resting comfortably at my side. The archery contest was drawing closer, and I was ready. Armed with a powerful new weapon, confidence surged through me. Victory seemed assured. Chapter 35. Archery Event. Elia Martell POVI sat on the high platform among the rows reserved for noble houses, a place of honor. A while ago, my mother and I watched the squire melee. My mother had insisted on our presence in that event because Prince Rhaegar was observing the contest, and she hoped that he might take notice of me. Now our attention had turned to the archery event. I found myself seated between my mother and my brother, a baron. Prince Rhaegar was nearby, in the Lannister section, next to Lord Tywin, who was eager to bask in the prince's presence. I stole a glance at him. He was undeniably handsome, the kind of handsome that made young women swoon and poets sing. But his manner left me cold. His words felt rehearsed, his smiles too perfect, a mask of courtesy worn by someone eager to please everyone. The facade was beautiful, but it felt hollow. I found myself disappointed, even bored, by the endless parade of empty compliments he offered to everyone who approached. Yet despite my disinterest, I couldn't help but feel a pang of pity for him. Trapped in a gilded cage, a bird singing only the songs expected of him. My thoughts wandered to someone else, someone who seemed the very opposite of Prince Rhaegar, Galahad, with his carefree demeanor, confidence, and that infuriatingly playful grin. I couldn't shake the memory of the previous night's dance with him. His singing had caught me off guard, the way his voice carried a sadness that seemed to come from a deeper place. I didn't understand why I had cried, why the song had resonated with me so deeply. I had wanted to see Galahad's axe-throwing contest earlier, to witness his skill and accuracy firsthand. But duty to my mother and her ambitions had kept me at the prince's side, trying to curry favor like so many other noble ladies. I wasn't the only one vying for his attention, there were other ladies from other houses. We were a sea of rivals, smiling and playing our parts, even if our smiles felt forced. A baron had filled me in on Galahad's performance in the axe event, how every throw had been flawless, his aim precise and deadly. He had even won the final round, earning 2,000 gold dragons, a small fortune. I was glad for him, truly. He had mentioned entering the melee and the joust tomorrow, and with that prize money, he could afford finer armor for himself and his steed, and superior weapons. My attention shifted back to the archery event. 16 archers stood in the field, their bows at the ready, but my gaze was drawn to one in particular. There, among the competitors, stood Galahad. He looked different. Or was it just my imagination? His hair, now trimmed to shoulder length, caught the breeze, framing him like a halo of gold. His stance was steady, his gaze focused, and I couldn't help but notice the strength in his arms as he held the bow with practiced ease. He even looked slightly taller. He seemed at ease, as if the crowd and the pressure of competition were nothing but a passing breeze to him. The crowd hushed as the archery contest began in earnest. The preliminaries had ended some time ago, and now the true test of skill was about to unfold. The tension in the air was palpable, and I leaned forward slightly, eager to see if Galahad would prove himself among the best archers. Prince Rhaegar Pav. My eyes focused intently on the field of the archery event, where the atmosphere buzzed with excitement. It had been a taxing morning, with ladies from various houses all trying to curry my favor. I found it exhausting, but I knew the importance of maintaining my image and garnering the support I needed. It was a necessary performance in this world of courtly intrigue, but on the field, my gaze was drawn to a single figure, the new young knight Galahad. Last night, I had begun to suspect he might be the one to change my fate. With his support, I believed I could forge a new path for myself. Regrettably, my enthusiasm had led me to indulge a bit too much in wine during our previous encounter. I'd felt bold, intoxicated by the prospect of winning his trust. But it was fine. I still had the entirety of the tourney ahead of me to recruit him to my side. As the archery contest commenced, the competitors began to take their shots. In the distance, I watched as Galahad expertly pulled back his longbow. When he released the bowstring, I gasped in surprise as his arrow struck dead center, a perfect bullseye. I had heard him be referred to as Esser Axehead, a new title earned for his remarkable accuracy in axe throwing. Now, seeing it for myself, I believed the rumor. Other contestants also hit bullseyes, but none matched the precision of his shot. As he prepared to loose his second arrow, I felt a thrill of anticipation. Would he maintain his extraordinary aim? The moment came, and he released the arrow with a smooth motion. It flew through the air and hit dead center again, this time splitting the first arrow in half, perfectly nestled in the previous arrow's space. A smile spread across my face. I had to recruit him no matter what. I had heard he would also compete in the melee and the joust, and I could hardly contain my excitement at the thought of witnessing his skills firsthand. I had sent 2 of my Kingsguard to enter the melee event, Esser Barristan and Esser Arthur. I wanted them to observe Galahad's prowess. They would judge his skills for me, helping me determine if he was truly the knight I believed he could be. All of my Kingsguard and I would also participate in the joust. The thought thrilled me. I might have the chance to tilt my lance against him, to see firsthand what he was capable of. Galahad was not just any knight, he was the knight who could change my fate and save me from the same fate as my father. As the contest continued, my resolve strengthened. I would ensure that he recognized the potential of an alliance with me. Third paw of the round of 16 had ended with Galahad leading the scores. After that second arrow, which had split the first cleanly, he'd reined in his performance, deliberately holding back, it seemed. Even so, he remained unmatched. At 50 paces, his supernatural eyesight and uncanny accuracy made it seem as if the target were only an arm's length away. The crowd's gasps and murmurs of astonishment filled the air, a swell of awe that echoed from the small folk to the highest lords and ladies in attendance. The feats of archery they had witnessed were nothing short of remarkable, and it was clear to all that Galahad was a cut above the rest. Now, he was through to the quarterfinals, where only 8 archers remained. A 10-minute break was called, giving the contestants a chance to recover. Since this was the final event of the day, there was no rush as there had been earlier. Galahad made his way to the noble's stand, aware that every eye was on him. The elegance of his shots had set him apart, and there was a certain weight to the gazes that followed his every step. As he approached the Martell section, he spotted a baron lounging with his characteristic grin. "So, a baron, better pay up," Galahad called out, his voice carrying a teasing edge. "When you said you'd hit only bullseyes, I thought you were exaggerating," a baron replied, a playful glint in his eye. "But you've proven me wrong. I don't see any coin in your hand," Galahad retorted, his tone half serious. A baron chuckled. "I'll pay you later, I promise. As you can see, I don't have any coin on me right now." "Spent it all at the brothel, I suppose?" Galahad teased, feigning a knowing look. A baron's smirk widened. "True, I did." Beside a baron, Elia and their mother, Princess Nymeria, chuckle softly at the banter. "How much does my son owe you?" Nymeria asked, amusement clear in her eyes. 40 gold coins, Galahad answered, glancing between the prince and the princess with a grin. "Seems my brother is already in debt," Elia quipped, a smile lighting her face. "I apologize for his lack of foresight." A baron shrugged, entirely unconcerned. "Debts come and go, sister. Lucky for you, your mother's a princess, or else that debt might have had some nasty consequences," Princess Nymeria remarked with a mischievous glint, gesturing to one of her Martell knights. The knight handed over 2 small pouches, which Nymeria tossed lightly to Galahad. He caught them deftly, and with a mock-serious expression, he weighed them in his palm before opening them. To his surprise, the pouches contained 80 gold coins, 40 more than what he was owed. "Consider it a reward," Nymeria said with a wink. "You've earned it with your archery." I was impressed. Galahad gave a deep, theatrical bow, a smile playing on his lips. "I am honored, princess." As the break drew to a close, Galahad turned and made his way back to his position on the field. He heard Elia's voice call out behind him, clear and sincere. "Good luck, Sir Galahad." He paused, turning back to meet her gaze. "I'll do my best," he replied, confidence lacing his words. He took his place among the remaining competitors. The quarter-finals were about to begin. Galahad paused. The quarter-finals and semi-finals had been effortless. Each of my shots struck the bullseye without fail, arrow after arrow, flawless precision. It wasn't just my enhanced vision or the finely crafted bow that made it possible. No, it was the combination of my other supernatural senses, the way I could read the shifting wind, calculate the slightest change in angle, feel the exact pressure needed on the bowstring. It was as if my body, honed by the gift of reflexes and accuracy, had become a weapon in itself. But now, I stood in the final round. To my right was Sir Gilwood Hunter, a knight of the Vale and a renowned archer from House Hunter. His reputation as one of the best shots in the Vale was well deserved, but unfortunately for him, he faced me now. The 4,000 gold prize he might have claimed was already out of reach. "Lords and ladies, the final 2 of the archery event have been decided." The herald's voice rang out. To the right, Sir Gilwood, from House Hunter, representing the Vale. The crowd's response was harsh, a wave of jeers and booing directed at the outsider. He was a Vale knight, facing off against a Westerman on Westerman soil. To your left, Sir Galahad, representing the West and House Lannister. The crowd's mood shifted in an instant, a roar of support echoing from the stands, the cheers loud and unrelenting. I had the home field advantage, but truth be told, I didn't need it. The herald's words signaled the beginning of the final match. We each had 10 arrows, the target set back to 60 paces now, a considerable distance by any standard. Yet I felt no anxiety, no nerves, only the cold clarity that had carried me through the tournament thus far. I stepped forward to take my shot, feeling the eyes of the crowd upon me, feeling Gilwood's stare, heavy with anticipation. As I knocked my first arrow, I focused on the target, the bullseye clear in my sight as if it were a mere pace away. My senses heightened, the world slowing around me. I pulled back the bowstring, holding it firm, then glanced sideways at Gilwood, a smirk tugging at my lips. "Hey, Sir Gilwood," I called, my voice casual, mocking. Game over. Without turning my eyes back to the target, I loosed the arrow. It sailed through the air, a streak of deadly accuracy. I didn't need to watch it to know the result. The impact echoed as the arrow struck the target dead center, hitting the bullseye. The crowd gasped, and I could almost hear the sudden, sharp intake of Gilwood's breath, his heart beating faster. He was rattled. I knew, in that moment, that the competition was over. He had lost the match before it had even begun. With the same precision, I fired the next 9 arrows, each one sinking into the bullseye with unerring accuracy. The crowd's astonishment grew with every shot, their cheers swelling to a deafening crescendo. The winner of the archery event, Sir Galahad. The herald's voice boomed over the noise, declaring my victory. I'd won, not just the event, but the awe and admiration of everyone watching. 2 events were now under my belt. Chapter 36. Conclusion of Day 2. Third Povas. The archery event concluded and the cheers of the crowd began to fade. Galahad made his way toward the tourney master, in order to claim his document of victory. Suddenly, he sensed a rush of movement behind him. Without thinking, he sidestepped and extended his leg, tripping his would-be assailant. It was just a baron. A baron tumbled theatrically, rolling to his feet with a wide grin. "Ha ha, thought I'd catch you off guard," he laughed, dusting off his tunic with exaggerated flair. This playful rivalry had become a regular game between the two. A baron was determined to surprise Galahad just once, but he had yet to succeed. Watching from a short distance, Elia and Nymeria chuckled at a baron's antics, their expressions filled with amusement. 2 Martell knights followed closely behind them, keeping a watchful eye on the proceedings. Nymeria approached, shaking her head with a smile as she brushed the dust from a baron's shoulder. "Apologies for a baron's playfulness," she said, her tone teasing. "I trust you won't take it too seriously." Galahad returned the smile, his demeanor light. "No harm done. We're comrades, after all. Besides, I doubt your son will ever catch me." "Keep taunting me, Galahad," a baron called with mock indignation, his voice playful. "The viper will strike when you least expect it." Laughter rippled through the group, and Elia stepped closer, curiosity sparkling in her eyes. "Now that the competition is over, what are your plans?" Her brow lifted as she looked up at him, measuring him thoughtfully. "And, is it just me, or have you gotten taller?" "Well, first I'll collect my winnings, then I'll explore the fairgrounds for a bit," Galahad replied, a hint of a smile gracing his lips. "As for the other, I'm simply growing into a man. Quite normal, really." His expression remained cool and sincere. A baron leaned closer to Elia, a mischievous grin spreading across his face. "Entering manhood, he says. Means he's developing in other ways too, sister." Elia blinked, her expression a mix of confusion and surprise. Nymeria and a baron exchanged amused glances, sharing a knowing sigh at her innocence. Leaning in, Nymeria whispered a few words in her daughter's ear. Understanding dawned on Elia's face, and her cheeks flushed a soft pink. Galahad chuckled at the playful exchange, and they continued toward the tourney master's tent, where he received his victory document, sealed with the Lion of House Lannister. As they walked, the 4 of them, accompanied by the 2 Martell knights, began to explore the fair, taking in the various forms of entertainment and the delicious smells of food wafting through the air. "By the way, Galahad," a baron began, his tone turning curious, "how did you shoot so well during the archery event? Before the tournament, you didn't seem nearly that accurate." "Haha, well, it's all thanks to this new bow." Galahad grinned, unfastening the longbow strapped to his back and holding it out for a baron to see. A baron examined the bow, his brow furrowing in genuine intrigue. "May I?" he asked, taking it in his hands. "Wow, it's quite a unique bow. What's the story behind it?" "Well, it cost quite a handful of gold," Galahad started, pride evident in his voice. "Luckily, I was able to buy it after winning the axe tournament. From what I've heard, it's made from weirwood, and the bowstring is made of hemp. There's a tale about it, that it will hit its target no matter what, as long as the person can draw an arrow from it," he recounted, the myth lending a magical air to the bow's presence. "Bullshit," a baron replied, a playful smirk on his face. He didn't quite believe the story. "Shouldn't be that hard." He tried to pull the string, straining with all his might. "HMMMMFFF." A baron grunted, but the bowstring barely budged. Elia and Nymeria, who had been listening intently, exchanged astonished glances. The challenge suggested that Galahad's tale might have a kernel of truth after all. A baron, undeterred, turned to the two Martell knights. "Care to give it a try?" he challenged, gesturing for them to attempt to draw the string. They obliged, but moments later, both failed spectacularly. "Haha, that means you're quite strong then," Elia remarked, her laughter light and joyful. "Of course, look at these weapons. Does this look like a weak man?" Galahad rolled up his sleeves, revealing impressive forearms and bulging biceps, each muscle honed by years of physical training. "Gods, you're quite developed," Elia said, her eyes widening as she took in the sight. She had never realized he was this muscular. He always wore long sleeves, hiding his muscles. "May I?" Elia asked, tentatively reaching out to touch Galahad's arm. It was thick and firm, his skin smooth and warm beneath her fingertips. Moments later, Nymeria joined in, curious to feel the muscle that Galahad had kept hidden. All right, that's enough. Stop fondling my arms," Galahad chuckled, though he felt a bit uncomfortable under the mother and daughter duo curious touches. "Let's instead get some food and enjoy our time." "Ahem, what has gotten into me?" "You're right, let's go get some chicken, pizza, and Westerman fries," Nymeria said, trying to regain her composure as they laughed together, the playful atmosphere of the fair inviting them to indulge in its delights. "Yes, let's do that," Elia said with a nod following her mom's lead. Galahad and the Martells continued their conversations, as they enjoyed the delicacy and games from the fair. Ragnar Povi was being dragged into an alleyway of lanisport. "All I had wanted was to enjoy a few drinks with my men, but a group of troublemakers had barged in, hedge knights from the Reach, their arrogance palpable. I let it be and continued my drink. I had seen worse as an Iron Man. But one of them, noticing my armor and face, must have recognized me as Ironborn. They started taunting me, hurling insults about the seven-pointed star being the true faith and branding me a heathen. I ignored them. My 2 men and I were outnumbered, 10 against 3. But when they attacked my men, all hell broke loose. With quick reflexes, I seized a fork from the table and threw it into the eye of the ringleader. With a roar, I unsheathed my bastard sword and charged into the fray. I managed to take down 2 of them, but it was a futile victory. Both of my men fell, lifeless on the tavern floor. The remaining 8 Reach Knights turned their wrath on me, beating me to a pulp as they dragged me out into the night. The darkness enveloped us, and the streets were deserted. I tried to call for help, but a vicious kick to my head silenced me. As they pulled me into the alleyway, I couldn't help but reflect on my pitiful life. My mother had been a salt wife, captured from the Riverlands, raped by a dozen men before my father claimed her as his own. The very man who took her in ultimately ended her life. Not wanting to end up like her, dead at my father's hand, I knew I had to make myself useful. I trained myself to become the best axeman I could be. Over time, I even gathered a crew of my own. In all my 28 named day, I had always dreamt of sailing the seas, exploring the world, and creating a better life for my men. That's why, when I heard about the tourney in lanisport, I thought I could earn easy gold in the axe-throwing competition. But a young knight had bested me, Esser Galahad, known as Esser Axehead. A small smile crossed my lips at the thought of him. Unlike me, he had a bright future ahead. "Ah!" I groaned as the 2 Reach men slammed me against the wall. Moments later, the ringleader, now missing an eye, kicked me, knocking the wind out of my lungs. "Fucking heathen, you'll pay for what you did," he spat, his voice dripping with venom. Despite the pain coursing through me, I felt a surge of joy from his anger. I knew I was going to die here, so I began to laugh, a bitter, defiant sound. "Ha ha ha," the laughter came out rough and strained. "You." Another kick sent me reeling. "Ha ha ha," I laughed again, trying to mask my pain, refusing to give them any satisfaction. The kicks and punches piled on, and I lost track of the blows raining down on me. "Arg." Suddenly, I heard one of them gurgle, followed by others, as if they were choking on water. With great effort, I pulled myself out of my curled position and looked up to see 8 hooded figures standing over me. My gaze shifted back to the men who had beaten me. They lay lifeless, their bodies sprawled across the cobblestones, a testament to the reckoning they had sought to deliver upon me. I built up my saliva and spat at the Reach Knights' bodies, a weak chuckle escaping my cracked lips, a final act of defiance against those who had tried to extinguish my spirit. But the world around me began to blur, and I collapsed. Chapter 37. Melee preliminary rounds. Third paw of the clash of steel and the shouts of men filled the fenced field as the 10 combatants engaged in the chaotic melee. Mud flew and blades clanged in an unrestrained dance of brutality and skill. This was no mere brawl but the preliminary round for the tourney's grand melee. Over 300 knights had entered, forcing the organizers to create 30 groups of a minimum of 10, each with a single objective: to emerge as one of the last 2 standing and move to the next round. In the crowds, Galahad stood with Garion, a baron, and Tyget, watching intently. Normally, such a free-for-all might have failed to hold their attention, but today was different. Among the 10 battling for dominance was Esser Barristan Selmy, a living legend, revered throughout the realm as one of the finest knights. Esser Barristan Selmy, standing at 6 feet 2 inches and clad in his white cloak, moved with a deadly precision that seemed almost effortless. Despite his age, he was still at the peak of his skill, facing off against 3 knights with a fluidity that defied his years. Galahad observed him closely, studying the way Barristan used his shield to parry, turning his opponent's blows to his advantage. Every step, every motion, was controlled, economical, as he measured his foe's attacks before striking back with swift, calculated force. Not far from him, another knight caught Galahad's eye, Esser Brynden Tully, known as the Blackfish. In the early moments of the melee, when most had charged at Esser Barristan, Esser Brynden had instead chosen to assist him. The Blackfish's approach was markedly different from Selmy's. Where Barristan's movements were refined and deliberate, Esser Brynden fought with a relentless, fierce intensity. At 6 feet 6 inches and in his early 30s, he was a formidable presence, his strikes brutal and his defenses strong. Against 2 knights, he used his reach and raw strength to overpower them, his blade flashing with a punishing, almost feral intensity. Galahad watched as Esser Barristan concluded his bout, dazing one knight with a well strike to the head before turning to the 2 remaining foes. They lunged in tandem, but Selmy, ever the tactician, sidestepped and struck swiftly. His blade found the back of one knight, who dropped, dazed. The final opponent, sensing his disadvantage, scrambled to defend, but it was futile. Esser Barristan's strikes came at him from every angle, unyielding. Within moments, the knight was unarmed, forced to yield to Selmy's superior skill. Meanwhile, Esser Brynden had ended his own battle in brutal fashion. One knight lay on the ground, his weapon cast aside by the Blackfish's forceful strikes. Another knight attempted to stand his ground but fell under Brynden's relentless assault, yielding before he could be struck down further. With the dust settled and the field cleared, Galahad turned to his companions, his eyes bright with admiration. "That's a great fight," he said, grinning. "The technique, speed, and experience from Esser Barristan, near perfect." Watching the legendary knight was like witnessing art in motion. Garion nodded, a note of awe in his voice. "Right, I don't think he took a single misstep. Barristan's calculated movements, his unwavering balance, he'd made no error, showing both supreme control and deadly precision." A baron's eyes gleamed with his trademark confidence. "But even with all his experience, I think you could defeat him." His gaze was direct, assured. A baron's trust in Galahad's skill was unshakable. "Nonsense," Tyget huffed, crossing his arms. "Do you truly think a mere knight has a chance against Esser Barristan the Bold?" Garion interjected, smirking. "Are you forgetting that mere knight, Galahad, has bested all of us, and made it look easy?" Their voices grew louder, with each friend defending their view. An argument sparked to life over who would triumph, Galahad or Esser Barristan. Galahad raised his hands, laughing. "Calm down, lads, it's really not that big of a deal," he said, his voice steady. "Anyway, we'll see if I even make it far enough to face him." His grin was genuine, humble yet excited at the thought of the challenge. "I know you can beat him," Garion said firmly, confident in his tone. A baron gave a nod of agreement, while Tyget only sighed, skeptical but supportive in his own way. "Anyway," Galahad said, glancing towards the field, "my group's up next," he said with a confident tone. A baron extended his hand, his grip firm. "I know you'll do well, but good luck, all the same." "Good luck," Garion echoed, clapping Galahad on the shoulder. "Good luck," Tyget muttered, his expression softening, the doubt replaced by a flicker of pride. Tywin Povi sat on the top rows of seats in the private box, overlooking the bustling melee below. Joanna sat to my right, with our twins on either side of her, eyes fixed on the field, watching with rapt attention. She cradled Tyrion, who lay sound asleep in her arms, oblivious to the world. On my left sat Prince Rhaegar and his Kingsguard, Esser Luwin Martell. Rhaegar watched the melee intently, a faint smile on his face as Esser Barristan, the Kingsguard, stood victorious, advancing to the next round. "Has the tourney been enjoyable, Prince Rhaegar?" I inquired, keeping my tone measured, respectful. Winning the prince's favor was a subtle art, one that could prove most valuable. "Yes, Lord Tywin, very much so. And the food here is unique," Rhaegar replied, picking up a handful of golden fries from a bowl resting on his knee. It seemed the delicacies of lanisport had already piqued his interest. "It pleases me to hear that," I said, inclining my head slightly. "As you may have noticed, my city has undergone some remarkable changes in recent years." I continue with a mysterious tone. Rhaegar's eyes moved from the field to meet mine, his brow furrowing slightly in curiosity. "And what is the cause of such changes?" I glanced down at the field, my mind drifting momentarily over the transformations sweeping lanisport. "A new merchant group," I began, calling themselves the Lionheart family, has emerged within my lands. They've expanded quickly, establishing themselves in trade and commerce, altering the very landscape of lanisport. "The Lionheart family," Rhaegar repeated, intrigued. "Do you know how they rose to such prominence?" he asked. "We lack definitive information," Joanna spoke up, joining the conversation. "Some believe their rise began before the Purge, others say afterward." "The Purge," Rhaegar tilted his head, recalling. "Is that the incident that caused such chaos last year, the reason you couldn't come to court?" "Yes," Joanna said, her expression darkening slightly. "More than 500 perished in a couple weeks. But I heard from my father and others at court that it was a fabrication," Rhaegar murmured, puzzled. Joanna's expression grew solemn. "Yes, Prince, it was no rumor. It happened." Rhaegar's brow furrowed, uncomfortable. "And you allow the Lionhearts to continue? Such influence could be dangerous." A pause hung between us, the weight of his question echoing in the din of the crowd. Finally, I spoke, careful to measure my words. "It's quite the opposite, Prince. The Lionhearts have brought much to lanisport. The food you enjoy, the entertainment, it's their creation. And for their earnings, I collect a share in taxes." Rhaegar arched a brow. "And how much is this share?" 20%, I replied smoothly, watching his reaction. He tilted his head, skeptical. "Only 20%, they seem successful enough to warrant more." I allowed a rare, satisfied smile. "They are exceptionally profitable, Prince. That 20% will alone bring in over 100,000 gold dragons this year." Rhaegar's eyes widened slightly as the realization settled. "That's more than many noble houses bring in from all their holdings." "Precisely," I said. "With them, we're no longer bound solely to the mines. Lanisport itself has become a source of wealth." Rhaegar nodded slowly, comprehension and respect mingling in his gaze. He saw now what I had built, a subtle alliance, one that ensured Lanisport's prosperity and placed the Lannisters at its center. Richard Pav I stood in the arena, a circular field enclosed by fences. Small folk gathered around, eager for the spectacle, while nobles sat high above, watching from their lofty seats. I was clad in new armor, commissioned and crafted by Corlos and his apprentices. It had been completed a week before the tourney. As I looked down, I took in the full majesty of Corlos's craftsmanship. The armor was dark, polished steel, gleaming faintly in the midday sun. Each plate was molded to my form, allowing me to move freely. Over my shoulders lay a thick, dark fur mantle, lending weight and savage elegance to my silhouette. It cushioned my neck, and with each movement, it swayed in time with the breeze. The helm crowned my head, topped with a plume of red that flickered like flames in the wind, a stark contrast against the shadowed metal of the visor. Only a narrow slit allowed me sight, rimmed with jagged edges that lent my gaze a sharp, merciless look. In my gauntleted hands, I gripped the hilts of my twin swords, feeling the weight and readiness for the combat ahead. After the herald announced the names of all competing knights and surprisingly a lord, the melee began. I took a steadying breath, my gaze sweeping over the 9 combatants who stood across the field. Unlike Esser Brynden Tully and Esser Barristan Selmy, who had partnered up to increase their odds, I would rely on no one. A knight from the Vale, his helm adorned with a falcon's crest, squared off with me first. I gave him no time to prepare, no respect in my approach. With a feint with my left sword, I drew his attention with one blade, while my right sword swung low and fast, smashing against his right rib with precise force. Though the sword was blunted for the melee, the impact made him groan and crumple, clutching his side. His pained expression spoke volumes as he yielded, allowing the marshals to drag him away. Without hesitation, I turned to the other knights, noting how they were still tangled in battles with their chosen foes. I went to my next target. I barged into two knights locked in combat, catching one with a swift kick to the back, which sent him stumbling forward into his opponent. Both tumbled to the ground, and I struck each one sharply. They groaned and signaled their surrender. Another two down. Normally, these group melees lasted close to 20 minutes, but at this rate, I would secure my victory in record time. Spotting two knights locked in a fierce duel, I strode between them, drawing their attention with a taunting gesture, my swords pointed at both. The crowd roared, anticipating a more drawn-out spectacle. I decided to indulge them, deflecting their attacks with fluid movements, allowing them to tire themselves out. As I danced between their strikes, evading as though this were a mere warm-up. When they began to slow, their breaths labored, I moved in for the finish. I feinted towards one, making him flinch and step back, then pivoted to the other. A quick strike to his helm left him dazed, and he crumpled to the ground, stunned unconscious. Turning back to the other knight, I could see the terror in his eyes. He was backing away, trembling. The remaining knight was familiar, a lord, who I've seen at the feast. He was none other than the Lord Paramount of the Reach. During the announcement I had been surprised by the name Mace Tyrell being called. Now he was in front of me. I approached him slowly, each step measured and deliberate, savoring the tension that coiled between us. I could sense his fear rising, his heart thundering in his chest with an erratic rhythm that seemed to reverberate through the very air around us. Moments later I sensed movements behind me, two knights who had bested their own opponents closing in, ready to strike the back of my head. I ducked smoothly under their swings, letting their momentum carry them forward. With a swift pivot, I ended up behind them, and with each of my swords, I struck their ribs, a calculated force that cracked bone without killing. They crumpled, clutching their sides, and yielded under the press of my blades at their throats. The round was over. I planted my swords in the ground and lifted my helmet, allowing the cheers of the crowd to wash over me. I turned, glancing at the last man standing, Lord Mace Tyrell himself, who looked at me with an expression torn between awe and terror. His heart still raced as he struggled to process what had happened. "It seems it's your lucky day, Lord Mace Tyrell," I said with a grin, my voice carrying a confident edge. Mace pulled off his own helmet, his face pale and glistening with sweat. His eyes darted nervously, as though expecting to be struck down at any moment. The herald's voice rang out over the field, "The winners of this round, Sir Galahad and Lord Mace Tyrell." As I turned to leave, the rush of victory still coursing through my veins, I felt a presence step into my path. It was Mace Tyrell, his face flushed with excitement yet shadowed with lingering fear. He looked as if he'd witnessed something unnatural, something he couldn't quite believe. "Sir Galahad, wait up," he called, his voice wavering. "What you did there was legendary. I know you're sworn to House Lannister, but if you're willing, I'd be honored to have you serve me instead." His words stumbled over each other, like a man grappling with the audacity of his own offer. He hadn't expected to survive the round without beating any opponent, and the weight of that realization showed in his eyes. I met his gaze, a small smile tugging at my lips. "I'll think about it," I said, clapping him on the shoulder in a friendly gesture, though the touch likely held more weight for him than I intended. With that, I strode away, the cheers of the crowd still ringing in my ears. Just like that, another connection was forged. Chapter 38. Ladies of the Tourney. Cersei Lannister POVI reminisce about the melee, where knights crashed against each other in a storm of steel. Watching them bash in each other's heads was a beautiful sight, especially when Galahad took down 6 knights by himself. The memory made me smile, my needle forgotten in my hand as I replayed the image in my mind. "Cersei, you're doing it all wrong." The voice to my left was a sharp reminder of where I was. I looked over, annoyed, and saw her face, Caitlin Tully. A few name days older than me, with eyes like muddy sapphires, a poor match for my own green. Her auburn hair was just as lacking, dull and unimpressive next to my golden waves. The very sight of her grated on me. My mother had forced me to befriend her, since she was also the daughter of a Lord Paramount, but I could hardly stand her. While I'd rather be out with Jamie and the boys, here I was, stuck in this stuffy tent with Caitlin, her sister, other young ladies, and a septa watching over us all. And if that wasn't bad enough, Caitlin always managed to be better at everything, sewing, singing, dancing. It was infuriating. Malara, here, I said, tossing my sewing kit to my lady-in-waiting, the only one I liked in this tent. Finish this for me. I could see Caitlin's mouth tighten as she watched. What do you think you're doing? She asked, clearly taken aback. I smirked, meeting her gaze. I'm the daughter of a Lord Paramount. Why should I sew when I have ladies who can do it for me? Her eyes narrowed as she shot back, that's exactly why you should sew. The mother says a woman must follow the right path and lead by example. There she went again, talking about the mother from the seven-pointed star, as if I didn't already know about it. Her words grated on me, as did the glint of that necklace around her neck. I felt an urge to snap it right off. Oh, please, I scoffed, rolling my eyes. If you want to lead by example, Caitlin, then keep sewing. As for me, I have better things to do. Without waiting for her response, I turned and strode toward the tent's exit. Young lady, where do you think you're going? The septa, who had been hovering over us with a tight-lipped expression, suddenly appeared in front of me. I rolled my eyes, my patience thoroughly worn thin. Move aside, I said, annoyance clear in my voice. She held up a hand, blocking my path. Please, Lady Cersei, sewing is important. You'll need it for your... Before the septa could finish her sentence, I slipped around her and darted out of the tent. The fresh air filled my lungs, lifting the weight of the stuffy tent and the needles I couldn't stand. My eyes quickly scanned the grounds, and in the distance, I spotted them, my uncles Garyon and Tyget, the Dornish Prince Oberyn, and, of course, my prince, Galahad. I ran toward them, savoring each step of freedom. Wait, Lady Cersei. The septa's voice floated faintly behind me, but I didn't even glance back. My feet carried me toward Galahad and the others, away from needles and thread, away from the septa and Caitlin with her insufferable sense of duty. Galahad was the first to notice me, his face lighting up with surprise as he caught my eye. Whoa there, Lady Cersei. What are you doing out here? He was dressed in simple attire, as were the others, taking a well-earned rest before the jousting began. All four of them had advanced to the next round in the melee, and I could tell they were enjoying their break. I wasted no time, putting on a pout as I rushed over to Galahad and hid behind him with the best crocodile tears I could muster. Help me, the septa and Caitlin are making fun of me. My uncles and Oberyn laughed, clearly amused. I peeked out from behind Galahad, and sure enough, the septa was marching toward us, her face tight with disapproval. And beside her, following along like an obedient hound, was Caitlin, all dutiful and proper, probably eager to tattle. Ah, trouble follows you wherever you go, doesn't it? Oberyn chuckled, crossing his arms as he looked down at me with a smirk. Garyon nudged Tyget with a grin. Seems the little lioness has more spirit than her handlers know what to do with. I pressed closer to Galahad, deepening my pout as I glanced up at him, hoping he'd play along. He looked at me and nodded with a smile. His expression then shifted, and he turned to the septa with a serious, almost scolding tone. What seems to be the problem? What have you done to Lady Cersei? The severity in his voice caught me off guard. It even sounded real. What do you mean? I was only trying to get Lady Cersei back to her sewing, the septa replied, her voice faltering, suddenly timid. That's not what I see, Garyon added, stepping in with a firm look. My niece told me quite a different story. The septa's face went pale, her words catching in her throat. It's not, she stammered, at a loss under their gaze. Leave my niece be today, and we'll forget anything that may have happened, Tyget added, towering over her. The septa gave a quick, shaky nod and practically fled back to the tent, her skirts fluttering as she hurried off. Ha ha ha, Oberyn burst out laughing, clearly entertained by the whole charade. I couldn't help but join in, feeling triumphant. And when I looked over at Caitlin, still standing there, stunned and blinking, it was like a cherry on top. I strode up to her with a smirk. You see, Catty, your septa can't do anything, I said smugly, savoring the look of shock in her blue eyes. Caddy was a mocking nickname I had given her. But tears began to well up, and her lips trembled. She looked truly upset, her small frame shaking. Whoa, whoa, Lady Cersei, Galahad stepped between us, his tone gentle as he glanced at me. Let's not be too harsh, all right. He turned to Catelyn, his expression softening. You two should try to get along. You're not enemies. You're noble ladies of respected houses, and you should act as such. He smiled, holding out a small cake. Here, this should help. I apologize for my aggression earlier. Cheer up, Lady Catelyn. Catelyn blinked at him, then reached out, taking the cake with a small, uncertain smile. She bit into it, and her face brightened with a spark of joy. Looking at the scene, a thought struck me. Galahad was so good at brightening people's moods. I wondered if I looked that excited when eating one of Galahad's treats. I nudged Galahad. Me too. I held out my hand, grinning. He smiled at me and handed me a piece of cake. Me too. A Baron teased, holding his hand out, a mischievous grin on his face. With a roll of his eyes, Galahad gave him a cake too. Me too, Garyon chimed in, and even Tyget, usually so serious, was reaching out. You guys should have bought them from the stalls earlier. Galahad huffed. It was directed to my uncles and a Baron, though he couldn't help grinning. We all laughed, the tension forgotten. Third Coven, the heart of a pavilion tent, grand and spacious, 5 noble ladies sat in quiet composure, the most powerful women in the 7 kingdoms. Sunlight seeped through the canvas, bathing Joanna Lannister, Princess Nymeria Martell, Olenna Tyrell, Cassana Baratheon, and Minissa Tully in a warm glow. Each of them occupied a seat around a round table, where silks, threads, and teacups lay scattered like the fragments of their house's might and influence. It was a rare interlude, a quiet break in the clamor of the tourney grounds, where knights and noblemen would soon vie for a glance, a smile, perhaps even a favor, from one of these esteemed ladies. For now, though, they sat as equals, sharing needlework and tea, each stitching her own handkerchief in patterns that suited her station and taste. Joanna's fingers worked swiftly, golden thread winding around the outline of a lion's head, her house's sigil precise and bold against the ivory cloth. Beside her, Nymeria's needle traced the flowing lines of a sunburst, bright and warm against the dark fabric, a proud nod to her homeland in Dorne. Olenna Tyrell's handkerchief bore a subtle rose, intricately detailed, while Cassana embroidered a fierce stag, the strength of House Baratheon woven into every stitch. Minissa, soft-spoken and thoughtful, wove the ripples of a trout leaping across blue silk, the essence of Riverrun brought to life with every pass of the needle. They stitched in companionable silence, the faint clink of teacups and quiet rustle of fabric filling the air. Finally, Olenna's sharp voice cut through the gentle murmur of the tent. So, Lady Joanna, she began, a sly smile tugging at her lips as she continued stitching. Have you thought of any suitable marriages for your children? I heard you rejected the Martells, a sensible choice, I'd say. Dorne is quite a distance from here. Her words were light, but her glance at Nymeria was anything but. Joanna felt the undercurrent of tension thickening between the two, and she wasn't alone. Cassana and Minissa exchanged wary glances, sensing the familiar sparks of a rivalry rekindling. Nymeria's lips curved in a smirk, her dark eyes flashing. You're one to talk, Olenna. Last I heard, all your children are already betrothed. Such a shame you only have 3, she said smoothly, a subtle barb veiled in her words, implying that her own lineage would be all the stronger for its numbers. Olenna's needle paused mid-stitch, but her tone remained cool. Quality over quantity, Princess Nymeria. Besides, not every lady needs men around them to prove their worth. Enough, Joanna interjected, her voice calm yet commanding, her gaze sweeping between the two. Let's not make a battlefield out of this piece. To answer your question, my children are still young, far from marriage age. Tywin and I have agreed to discuss it later, Joanna said, her tone carefully measured. She knew Tywin's intentions well. He wanted the Riverlands, and he had his eye on a match between Jaime and Minissa's daughter, Catelyn. But she couldn't be too direct about it. She needed to maintain an advantage in the negotiation. Lady Minissa, your daughter Catelyn is quite a good girl. From what I've heard from the Septa, my daughter and yours have been getting along, Joanna said, forcing a smile. It was a blatant lie. Whenever Catelyn's name came up, Cersei would groan loudly in annoyance. Yes, Lady Joanna, they have, Manissa replied, equally disingenuous. Whenever Cersei's name crossed her lips, Catelyn's face would twist with frustration. Haha, that's nice. It's always good to have the next generation of ladies so close, Cassandra chimed in, eager to keep the conversation flowing. Though your daughters are still young to talk of marriage, my son Robert is of Cersei and Catelyn's age. Please do consider it, Cassandra added, a knowing smile aimed at both Joanna and Manissa. Haha, of course, Joanna said, her mind racing. No way in the seven hells would Tywin accept a match with anyone other than Prince Rhaegar for Cersei. I'll think about it, Manissa said thoughtfully. Yet deep down, she couldn't imagine a pairing. From what she'd seen of the boisterous boy, there was no compatibility between her sweet Catelyn and the brute Robert. The ladies continued their sewing, their nimble fingers working deftly with the fabric. Each handkerchief was nearly complete, the intricate designs reflecting their individual styles. Chapter 39. The Preliminary Joust. Third paw of the jousting grounds hummed with anticipation as the preliminary rounds began. Noble and small folk alike packed the stands, eyes wide with excitement, voices raised in cheers. Moments before, they had witnessed Sir Arthur Dayne's triumph over a Lannister knight, and now, two new contenders readied themselves to clash. The herald stepped forward, his voice carrying over the crowd. From the right, Sir Lyn Corbray of the Vale. Cheers rose as Sir Lyn, his armor emblazoned with a raven clutching a heart, lifted a hand in acknowledgement. His gaze was focused and sharp. And from the left, Sir Galahad, representing House Lannister and the West. Galahad rode in, his white armor and lion-engraved pauldrons shining in the midday sun. The crowd's cheers swelled, and cries of Sir Axehead and Sir Hawkeye echoed, celebrating his achievements in both archery and axe-throwing. Galahad guided his horse smoothly toward the stands, his gaze catching on a familiar princess seated with quiet dignity. Would you grant me your favor, Princess Elia? He called, his tone warm and playful. Elia smiled as she tucked a stray strand of hair behind her ear, the small gesture softening her expression. She held out a handkerchief she'd embroidered herself, a lion devouring a sun. Here, Sir Galahad, I wish you good fortune, she said, letting the cloth fall into his waiting hand. Galahad took it with a dramatic flair, inhaling its faint scent. The playful gesture sparked a blush on Elia's cheeks and a murmur among the crowd. I'll bring honor to you, Princess, he said, his voice just loud enough for her to hear, before turning his horse back to the field. Elia's gaze lingered on him, her heart beating faster than she'd admit. Beside her, Princess Nymeria raised an eyebrow, clearly intrigued, while Elia touched her chest, a warmth growing there, a feeling that had taken root ever since their dance at the feast. On the field, Galahad secured the handkerchief around his wrist and accepted his lance from the herald. Across from him, Sir Lyn lifted his own lance in silent acknowledgement, his expression fierce. The trumpet sounded, slicing through the crowd's murmurs, and in an instant, the knights charged. Hoofs thundered against the earth as they closed the distance. The impact was thunderous. Galahad's lance shattered against Sir Lyn's shield, rocking his opponent back in the saddle. During this, Galahad had skillfully maneuvered his horse, just barely dodging Sir Lyn's lance. He was now up 3 points. The crowd's applause swept over the field as the knights returned to their positions. Riding back, Galahad stole a quick glance at Elia, showing her the handkerchief with a hint of a smile. Back at his mark, he steadied himself for the second pass. This time, he didn't evade. Urging his horse forward, he braced as Sir Lyn's lance crashed against his shield. Galahad didn't flinch, his body unshaken. In the same heartbeat, his own lance struck, hitting Sir Lyn square in the chest. Sir Lyn was thrown from his saddle, crashing to the ground as the crowd collectively gasped, then erupted in cheers. Galahad slowed his horse, his eyes finding Elia as he lifted the handkerchief in quiet acknowledgement. The crowd's cheers rang out, echoing through the grounds as Sir Lyn lay stunned, the match decided in Galahad's favor. With the round finished and cheers still echoing, Galahad guided his stallion to the stands where Princess Elia awaited. He tilted his head up, voice steady but warm. How did I do, Princess Elia? Elia leaned over the edge, her gaze soft and approving. Quite well, Sir Galahad. I'm pleased with your performance. Then, in a daring move that drew murmurs from the crowd, Galahad raised the visor of his helmet and smoothly rose to stand on the saddle of his horse. Balancing atop the powerful black stallion, he was eye to eye with her, their faces close enough for him to see the flicker of surprise in her expression. "Here, Princess Elia, I'd like to return your handkerchief." He held it up with a charming smile, the glint in his eyes both bold and playful. Elia's brows knit in mild confusion. "But, why?" she asked, worry seeping into her voice. Had she misstepped somehow? He chuckled softly, the sound easing her concern. "In the next round, I hope you'll grant me the favor once more. Maybe each time, you could add a new detail, a touch of your scent, a mark of your artistry." He winked, his tone light with teasing warmth, extending the handkerchief toward her. Elia's chuckle joined his, the tension lifting as she took it from him. "Very well, Sir Galahad. I'll make sure it's worthy of you," she said jokingly. Galahad's smile deepened. "Then I'll see you at my next joust," he said, easing himself back down onto the saddle with graceful ease. Elia waved her handkerchief in farewell, her eyes following him as he rode away, her thoughts already drifting to what she might add to her favor for his next match. What was that? Elia had barely settled back into her seat when her mother's voice, curious and edged with a hint of amusement, cut through. Princess Nymeria's gaze was fixed on her daughter, a faint smile at the corners of her lips, eyes sparkling with intrigue. "What was what?" Elia replied, feigning innocence, though her smile toward the handkerchief betrayed her. "Giving your favor to Galahad and speaking to him like that, as if you were lovers," Nymeria said, her smirk growing. She had never seen her daughter so openly attached. Her daughter seemed preoccupied lately. Elia had paid little attention to Nymeria's encouragement to get closer to Prince Rhaegar, but now she began to understand why her daughter was not trying her best to woo the prince. Elia chuckled, waving a dismissive hand. "Oh, it's nothing like that. We're just friends," she hummed softly, fiddling with the handkerchief. But Nymeria's keen eyes narrowed as she studied her daughter's face, catching the soft glow there, the telltale sign of feelings Elia herself was likely trying to ignore or dismiss. Nymeria's gaze lingered on Galahad as he rode off, his figure proud and unmistakably confident. Though she, too, had been captivated by the young man's charisma and physique, her experience allowed her to rein in such feelings. Elia, however, was still young and inexperienced, her heart as open as the Dornish sands. It would not do well for rumors to spread, especially those that might cloud her daughter's reputation. Nymeria sighed, resolving to speak with Elia later. Alicent Povi stood in the large, sunlit room, my spine straight and hands folded neatly in front of me, striving to maintain the perfect posture. My chin was lifted just so, my shoulders pulled back, while Lady Elara Perrin, a noblewoman from a fallen house whose elegance still shone despite her lost titles, circled me with a critical eye. More than a decade ago, her family had fallen into debt, leading to the loss of their lands to another house. Most of her kin had perished, her father and brothers fighting bravely during the Rain and Tarbeck Rebellion. Though she had lost much, Lady Elara remained proud, determined to reclaim a sense of dignity. Now, she worked as an etiquette teacher for young ladies. Recently, she had been hired by my mother to help me learn how to conduct myself like a true lady. This was part of Richard's plan for our ascent to nobility. As his future wife, I had to be strong and poised by his side. "Keep your head high, child," Lady Elara murmured, her voice soft but firm. A noblewoman must always present herself with dignity. It had been over an hour of practicing perfect posture. I had sat with grace, walked with elegance, and learned the proper ways to greet people, all while maintaining this demanding stance. I swallowed, fighting the urge to shift my weight as my legs began to ache. My muscles strained against the unnatural stillness, but I resisted the temptation to slump. I could almost hear Richard's encouraging voice in my mind, urging me on. This was for him. "Do not let your gaze wander, Alicent," Lady Elara chided, catching the flicker of a smile on my lips. "A noblewoman's eyes are her weapons. They should be steady and cool, like steel. Any hint of emotion can be exploited by others." I blinked and quickly schooled my expression, allowing my face to become calm, almost detached. "Your posture speaks before you do," Lady Elara continued, moving to adjust my chin with a gentle touch. "Remember that, no matter who stands before you, they must see only what you wish them to see. Even if your heart pounds with fear, grief, or love, You must show them poise. This is the foundation upon which noble houses are built. Yes, Lady Elara, I replied, my voice steady, a quiet dignity woven into my tone. Lady Elara's lips curled into the faintest hint of a smile. Good. Now, let us see you walk. A lady glides, Alicent, like a shadow moving through silk. Taking a measured step, I began to move across the floor, each motion precise and controlled. I felt the ache building in my legs, the strain in my back, but I pushed through it. After a while, Lady Elara ended the lesson. The class was finally over. How did I do? I asked her, my eyes wide with anxiety. Perfect, down to every last movement, she replied, her voice warm and encouraging. A smile spread across my face, relief washing over me like a gentle tide. You said you wanted to learn dancing, right? Elara asked, a glimmer of curiosity in her eyes. Yes. 2 days ago, I danced with Richard, but my movements were awful. I want to learn to dance correctly. I recalled the evening fondly, but I had felt the burden of my inexperience. Richard had guided my movements, leading the rhythm, but I wanted to be better for him. All right, next class will be on dancing, Elara said, her smile brightening the room. I couldn't contain my excitement. I jumped up and hugged her tightly. Thank you, I exclaimed, my heart racing with anticipation. Hopefully, I would learn quickly and be ready to ask Richard for another dance. Chapter 40. Lionheart Meeting and Night Ride. Maria POVI took my seat at the head of the Lionheart round table, filling in for Richard. The meeting room felt both imposing and dignified. Lionheart crests adorned the walls, statues, paintings, delicate engravings on every ornament, displaying the family's power in lanisport. The room, bathed in warm light from a chandelier and oil lamps, cast the perfect glow over the table. Shadows lingered just beyond the windows as the hour grew late. My gaze swept over the 4 men seated around me, each of them young but capable and hardened by their roles. Laner, the master of coin and underboss of the Western District, managed our business dealings and tracked our earnings. Conrad, the master of assassins and underboss of the Eastern District, trained recruits and carried out missions in the shadows. John, our master of soldiers and underboss of the Southern District, led the daylight operations, his men enforcing the family's presence openly in the city. And then there was Adam, who was the underboss of the Northern District, our master of spies, who gathered intelligence from every hidden corner of lanisport and beyond. Together, these men ensured every facet of our operations ran smoothly, all under Richard's orders. I leaned forward, setting the tone as I opened the meeting. I trust business as well. A chorus of nods and murmurs of assent followed. Satisfied, I moved to our first order of business. Let's begin with the matter of the septon. Has the new one accepted our assistance? Laner was quick to respond. Yes, my lady, Septon Tristan has accepted our bribes. He's expressed his gratitude for the funds we provided to build more seps, as well as an orphanage and new soup kitchens. I smiled. Richard would be pleased. Good. The new sept will raise his standing, and ours as well. And the orphanage and kitchens will help those in need. This benefits the septon, and it keeps the people mindful of who truly provides for them. Laner nodded. He's also sent over books and parchments as a sign of gratitude. Might be useful in broadening our knowledge. Excellent, I said, my voice firm. Continue to monitor him. We want him aware of his position, and just who gave it to him. I turned to Conrad. How's the recruitment of the Ironborn, Ragnar, coming along? He woke up this morning, grateful for our rescue, Conrad replied with a faint smile, a glint of satisfaction in his eyes. Our assassins arrived just in time to save him from the night, he continued, his pride barely concealed. He's been resting and healing under our care since then. The wounds will take about a week to mend, but he's already thanking us for saving his life. Good, I replied, curiosity stirring at the implications. And his crew, already dealt with, Conrad assured me smoothly. I paid them off to leave lanisport, so when he's back on his feet, he'll find himself alone, and relying solely on us. I'll be working to ensure he sees our family as his only path forward. He's even mentioned repaying us. I nodded. Richard had ordered Ragnar's recruitment, and Conrad was proving himself a worthy executor, ensuring every detail aligned to draw the Ironborn into our fold. I turned to John, the sturdy master of soldiers. How is the city's protection, John? I trust there have been no disturbances. John gave a curt nod, confidence evident in his voice. No crimes worth mentioning, Lady Maria. We had some trouble from visitors, small folk and nobles from other cities, but it was handled swiftly. I gave a small, satisfied smile. Lanisport was ours, and anything that occurred within it did so only with Richard's, my, or the underboss's blessing. Good. Let's keep it that way. And make sure the children, the young ones in our family, are looked after. I don't want them harmed in any of this. The children, those used as our eyes and ears, were important and are the pillars of our family. John nodded with understanding. Don't worry. They've been well protected. With business in hand, I turned to Adam, our master of spies, eager for news of Richard. How is he faring in the tourney? I asked, concealing a touch of personal pride. Recently, I'd come to understand Richard's intentions to make my daughter his wife, a future that filled me with a quiet joy. My savior, my boss, our steadfast leader, now he looked to my Alicent with those intentions. The thought warmed me. My daughter deserves a partner who is strong, dependable, and capable, everything that Richard embodies. Adam's eyes lit with enthusiasm. He's become quite the favorite, Lady Maria. Winning the archery, axe throwing, and the preliminaries of the melee and joust has won him admiration from both small folk and nobles alike. I nodded, listening intently, each victory swelling a sense of pride. And today, Adam leaned forward, his excitement evident. Today, he won a duel in the melee against 2 knights, including Bronze Yohn Royce of the Vale. And he's unseated 3 knights in the joust, among them Brynden Tully. He's quickly gaining fame as a knight. A ripple of pride spread across the room. We were smiling at the accomplishments of our leader. It was a rare moment of shared warmth. Moments later we resumed our discussions, moving smoothly from one topic to the next. Elia Martell Pav. I stood in the shadows, the moonlight glinting off my dark cloak as I slipped quietly from my tent. The sounds of laughter and chatter drifted through the night air, mingling with the scent of roasting meats and sweet wines. Even at night, the tourney grounds were alive with the energy of small folk, nobles, and knights celebrating the day's events, but I craved a moment of peace away from the revelry. Navigating the bustling camp, I kept my head low, my heart racing with the thrill of sneaking out. I could hardly believe I was about to meet Galahad in the night. As I neared a large tree, its branches reached out like welcoming arms. Beneath its sheltering leaves sat Galahad. His golden hair glimmered in the moonlight, and he leaned against the trunk, a faint smile lighting his features as he looked up at the stars. My breath caught at the sight of him, a mixture of admiration and something deeper swelling within me. Today, he had claimed victory over 5 knights in both melee and joust, and his fame had soared. I could hardly keep up with the buzz surrounding him. Galahad, I whispered, stepping closer, my voice barely above the rustle of leaves in the gentle night breeze. His head turned, and his smile widened as he noticed me. Elia, he said, the warmth in his tone making me feel at ease. I'm glad you came. Of course, I replied, my nerves beginning to settle as I moved closer. I couldn't resist the chance to see you. He chuckled softly, the sound rich and inviting, and I could feel the tension of the day slip away. I wasn't sure if you would make it. It's quite a risk sneaking out like this. I need a break from the festivities, I admitted, my gaze lingering on his face, savoring the moment. There was something almost intoxicating about being so close to him. He stood up from his sitting position and stepped closer to me. My eyes fell on my handkerchief, tied around his right wrist like a bracelet, and a wave of warmth flooded my heart. Then would you mind a night ride with me? He asked, his smile disarming and genuine. I nodded immediately, excitement bubbling within me. Yes, I would love that. Then let's go, he said, taking my hands in his, leading me toward the stables. The thrill of the night, combined with his touch, sent shivers down my spine. As we arrived at the stable, he released my hands and moved to a beautiful black stallion. The horse stood tall and proud, its coat shimmering under the moonlight. Galahad reached out, gently petting the horse's mane, his fingers moving through the soft hair with a tenderness that made my heart swell. He leaned closer, whispering something to the animal, and I watched, intrigued. Are you talking to it? I asked, my curiosity piqued. Yes, Galahad replied, glancing back at me with a hint of amusement. What's his name? I asked, seeing as he cared for the stallion he must have a name for it. Lancelot, that's his name. He's a good boy, he said, continuing to pet the stallion, his voice filled with warmth. He gestured for me to do the same. I stepped forward, my hand reaching out hesitantly. Lancelot neighed softly, almost as if acknowledging my presence. A smile broke across my face as I petted him, the horse's coat warm beneath my fingers. Now that he knows you, it should be fine for you to ride him with me, Galahad said, his smile broadening. Really? I replied, a mix of excitement and nerves racing through me. Of course, he assured me, helping me mount Lancelot behind him. The stallion shifted beneath us, and I wrapped my arms around Galahad's waist for balance, my heart racing with a thrill that had little to do with riding and everything to do with the closeness between us. Hold on tight, he murmured, his voice warm and steady. I could feel the strength in his body, the warmth radiating from him, grounding me. With a gentle nudge, he urged Lancelot forward, and we began to move out of the stables and into the moonlit night. The sounds of revelry faded, replaced by the soft rhythm of Lancelot's hooves striking the earth. The cool night air surrounded us, carrying the scent of fresh grass and the faint song of distant night birds. Look at the stars, Galahad said, tilting his head back as his gaze drifted skyward. They're beautiful tonight, aren't they? I followed his gaze to the heavens, where a scatter of stars glittered like jewels. They are, I agreed, a feeling of freedom washing over me. It's almost as if they're winking at us. He chuckled softly, and the sound sent a warmth through me. Maybe they are. We rode further from the camp, the landscape around us dark and open, vast and silent. The gentle sway of Lancelot's stride, combined with Galahad's presence, made everything feel perfect. I leaned into him, resting my head against his back, feeling the slow, steady rhythm of his heartbeat beneath his tunic. Galahad, I whispered, my voice barely breaking the stillness, this is perfect. It is, he replied, glancing back at me, his smile soft, sending a flutter through me. Just us and the night. We fell into a comfortable silence, the world around us melting away as we rode. The moment felt magical, like something out of a dream, and I found myself hoping it would last forever.